Good evening, everyone. At this time, I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole of the Village Board to order. We have present myself, President McKay, Trustee Kudo, Trustee Ursink, and Trustee Stokebrand is joining us virtually. So that provides a quorum. Trustee Arndorfer is excused this evening, and Trustee Moore Baldoff and Trustee Lynn will be joining us. They'll be a little late. So we can change the record to reflect when they join us. So we have one item on our agenda for this evening. It is the Lake Drive project presentation from the Department of Transportation on design components and schedule. Just to kind of tee up how we're going to approach this, because there's a lot of technical information. We're going to have the Department of Transportation make their presentation via PowerPoint. I'm going to ask everyone to hold all their questions until the PowerPoint is completed. Then we will walk through each policy decision item from a discussion point, allowing questions and comments. We will take one at a time, with the lane configuration being the last point. And I think that has to do with that's how we're going to do it. And I'll take public comment at each discussion point as well. All right, with that, I will hand it over to Aaron. How do you pronounce your last name again? Bub, to present the Department of Transportation PowerPoint this evening.
Thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. I do want to introduce the team here. So Deb Tarnow is the Wisconsin Department of Transportation Project Manager. She's responsible for the day-to-day management of this job for the DOT. The supervisor is Reem Shaheen. Many of you have met Reem in past meetings. She's unable to be with us this evening. And I'm Aaron Bubb, the design consultant with the Ford Associates. Our agenda includes overview of the project scope. I want to discuss the second public involvement meeting that we held on this project. And then the key things we're looking for feedback on this evening are four things. One being bump outs or curb extensions. The second, crosswalk locations. The third, rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And the fourth is the project and construction schedule. After that, we will discuss feasible alternatives. So overview of the project, again, this is Lake Drive, which is State Highway 32. The limits on the south end are Edgewood Avenue, all the way up to Kensington Boulevard, which is about 1.3 miles. So the planned improvements include removing the pavement, the base materials below that, the curb and gutter, and replacing those. Improving curb ramps, which is where sidewalks intersect every side road, and making sure those ramps are ADA compatible. The project will add bike lanes, replace the traffic signal at the Capitol Drive intersection, upgrade street lighting, and install village-funded utility improvements. The second public meeting was held in June of 2022. The first meeting was held in May of 2021. So between those two meetings, we did get a lot of feedback from the public. The majority of that feedback centered on preserving trees in the terrace, which is also the parkland, that green space between the back of curb and the front of the sidewalk. And a majority of people were opposed to any widening of the pavement. So conclusions that the Department of Transportation made were eliminating pavement widening options. DOT wants to work with the village to preserve and protect those existing trees. And at the same time, the replacing kind alternative was eliminated from further consideration. Leaving that meeting, we received 33 comments from the public, either written by hand or by email. A summary of those are shown on the screen here. Specific comments regarding parking. 5 people wrote that they were in favor of removing parking. 2 people said they were opposed to removing parking. On the topic of bike lanes, 29 people said they were in favor of bike lanes. 1 was opposed, and 19 asked for a protected bike lane, which we'll discuss later in the presentation.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
I just got word from our virtual participant that when you turn your head, the mic doesn't pick up your, so while we appreciate the eye contact, our
Focus straight ahead. Is this better?
Parking removal, that was
Sir,
parking all together.
no one can hear the questions from down there, so,
Yes,
yeah, I
sir?
understand that there's a virtual meeting, so,
yeah, and also the procedure for meetings is that the chair recognizes people who need to speak, and I've asked that the PowerPoint go through. If you can hold your questions, if you need something to write with, we can give you something to make notes. Okay.
All right, so thank you for bringing that to my attention. Moving forward, I'll start at the top of this slide. Leaving that second public meeting, 33 comments were received, either written or in email. As far as parking removal, this would be on one side of the roadway. 5 were in favor of that, 2 were opposed. Specifically looking at bike lanes, 29 were in favor, 1 was opposed, and 19 asked for a protected bike lane, which we'll discuss later in the presentation. Looking at pedestrian safety enhancements, the department said they would study these and look at options. That's one of the main reasons we're here tonight. 21 were in favor and no one was opposed to pedestrian safety. Rectangular rapid flashing beacons, 17 people said they were in favor of installing them, 1 was opposed. So again, looking at areas where we need feedback or would like feedback from the village this evening, the first being bump outs, also known as curb extensions. So this would occupy the parking lane. It would be on the northbound side of the roadway only, the east side, which has parking. These bump outs or curb extensions would be funded by the DOT as part of the project. We'll go through potential locations. I have a slide for each of these, starting at the south end and working north, but specifically looking at Edgewood Avenue, Menlo Boulevard, Jarvis Street, Olive Street, and Kensington Boulevard. So again, looking at feedback needed tonight from the committee is whether or not the village wants to proceed with curb extensions and at what locations. So again, starting on the south end of the project at Edgewood Avenue, I do want to state that the Shorewood typical section or roadway alternatives are not required to match the city of Milwaukee. So if they do not match, installing a curb extension or bump out, which essentially is this red piece right here that occupies the parking lane, this would allow maximum flexibility to transition between the city of Milwaukee and village typical sections. If by chance those typical sections match, a bump out would still have its regular safety enhancements. It improves the visibility for pedestrians, gets them out behind parked cars in front of them. It also shortens that crosswalk distance, minimizing the amount of exposure a pedestrian has to live traffic. Moving north in the corridor, another option for a curb extension would be at Menlo Boulevard. This leads to the nature preserve on the east side of Lake Drive, and it's about halfway between Edgewood and Capitol Drive. The village did a transportation and parking study that was released in January of 2020, and it did recommend a bump out at this location. At Menlo, a crosswalk is shown on the south side of the intersection. A northern crossing is not shown because there's an existing driveway there on the east side of the roadway. Moving further north in the corridor, north of Capitol Drive, the first intersection is Jarvis Street. A possible curb extension is at that location. It's very close to the Atwater Park, Atwater Beach area. Again, this location was recommended in the village's transportation and parking study from January of 2020. In this configuration, 2 east-west crossings of Lake Drive are shown. A couple blocks north of there is Olive Street. This is still within the footprint of Atwater Park. So a curb extension is shown there. Again, in this situation, only 1 crossing is shown on the north side of the roadway. A southern crossing is not proposed because there's existing tree there, which is shown on the picture in the lower left. And then finally, moving north to the northern intersection on the project, it's Kensington Boulevard. Again, this would provide a transition between the village and Village of Shorewood and Village of Whitefish Bay typical sections. Here, a southern crossing is shown. A northern crossing is not shown because there is an existing driveway there. The second area the DOT is looking for feedback on this evening are crosswalk locations. So the Department of Transportation would fund markings for crosswalks at a signalized intersection, in this case, Capitol Drive. All the other locations would need to be funded 100% by the village. So options include installing high visibility markings or the ladder style that the village does have on Lake Drive today, or a more traditional marking such as what's shown here in green. The anticipated installation costs are about $2,000 per crossing for the high visibility and about half that for the traditional markings. These markings would be installed in epoxy and typically would need to be remarked every 3 to 5 years, depending on the village's maintenance schedule. So again, the feedback we need tonight is marking locations and the type of crosswalk marking to be implemented. The third area we're seeking feedback on is the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. The Department of Transportation has determined that they're not warranted from their standpoint, so they would defer to the village. Installation of them would be funded 100% by the village. They would need to be installed at marked crossings. Looking at the village study that was done in January of 2020, it did recommend installation at Menlo Boulevard and Jarvis Street. The anticipated installation cost would be $15,000 to $20,000 per crossing. So any of the alternatives that showed 2 crossings at an intersection, this number would be doubled then. So again, feedback the Department of Transportation is looking for this evening is whether or not to include the rectangular rapid flashing beacons in the project, and if so, at what locations. The fourth piece that we discussed is the schedule. Outlined here is a rough schedule of how the Department of Transportation would deliver this, ultimately leading to 2025 construction. Based on the feedback we received tonight, we'd like to have approved scope by the end of November of this year. Early 2023, DOT would be looking to share the preferred alternative. The environmental document would be in March of next year with a right-of-way plat complete in May. So there is some real estate acquisition required as part of this project. This was presented at the last PIM in June. There are about 19 areas where we need some grading easements temporarily to facilitate construction of curb ramps and driveways and blend those slopes into the budding properties. So there's roughly a year for real estate acquisition. A 4th public involvement meeting would be anticipated in late summer, early fall of 2024. This would be to go through construction staging and access, let residents and the public know how we'll build the project, how you'll get around during construction. Final plans are due in November of 24, again with construction in 2025. So I know the village has their own plans for how you manage your projects within the village, and we know that takes some coordination. So we're looking at consensus on 2025 construction of Lake Drive. With that, I do want to shift to feasible alternatives, remaining alternatives. The first being shown on the screen here is a 6-foot bike lane. It has parking at the curb.
Aaron, did you mute yourself?
Yeah, it's funny. Shows that I'm still on. Let's see.
I didn't do anything. All of a sudden, it didn't even-
Can you hear me?
I don't know what to tell you.
No.
I
I think he's gonna have to use something else.
Yeah. It's fine.
Feel free to join us.
I don't think, is that one up too?
Yeah, actually.
The audio is that, the audio.
Can you hear me okay on this one? Sounds kind of fine.
I know you got to talk really loud and directly at it. Maybe,
Oh, there's the door.
That's going.
we're having a little technical difficulties here.
But no.
Okay, I think we found an alternative, so we won't need to take a recess.
Oh, okay.
How's this?
Excellent.
Okay, so thanks for bearing with us on this one. We did shift to feasible alternatives that are remaining for this project. The first being a 6-foot bike lane with parking at the curb. This alternative was presented in June of 2022. It's still a remaining alternative. Essentially, all these alternatives do remove parking on the west side of Lake Drive. And again, these alternatives are outside the footprint of the Capitol Drive intersection. So this alternative has one 12-foot driving lane in each direction with a 6-foot bike lane in each direction, and then parking on the northbound side of the road, which is the east side of Lake Drive. Shifting to another alternative, this is a new alternative. Essentially, as I stated earlier, I kind of mentioned that we had some comments from the public leaving the last PIM about having a protected bike lane. So this alternative is the previous alternative, but it shifts the location of the bike lane. So we're calling it the 6-foot bike lane with bike lane at curb. So this 8-foot parking lane and 6-foot bike lane are swapped. I'll flip back to the previous slide just so you can see the difference between the two, and now I'll transition forward. So this would be an example of a parking protected bike lane. Another alternative would be a buffered 5-foot bike lane with parking at the curb. This also is a new alternative. It has a 10-foot driving lane in each direction, a 3-foot buffer lane against the through lane and the bike lane. There's a bike lane in each direction that's 5 feet wide. And this alternative, the parking lane is against the curb. So this is similar to a City of Milwaukee alternative. There was talk, there's a project south of Edgewood that the City of Milwaukee is working to implement. And so if there is a desire to have consistency in the corridor, this is similar to one of their potential alternatives. And then likewise, this is the same alternative, but it has the bike lane at the curb, and it switches out the northbound side of the roadway here. So I'll flip back, but the northbound has a 10-foot lane, and instead of going from a buffer to a bike lane to parking, with this option, we go 8-foot parking lane, then the buffer, then the bike lane. So again, that is a new alternative that's been developed that's considered feasible. So again, in summary, areas where we're looking for feedback this evening, pretty much a yes or no on curb extensions and locations, crosswalk locations, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, 2025 construction, and then the preference from the village on where the bike lane should be located on the roadway alternatives. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much. Okay, so because we got a lot of emails from the residents today, thank you very much for all that input. I had a sort of a huddle with the staff today just to see where we were with the themes that came through with the emails, how that matched up with the technical aspects of the different alternatives. And then walked through each decision item just to make sure that we were on the same page. So I have a little cheat sheet of, because I just am like, with each decision, I'm going to summarize what it is that we're being asked for. I'm going to go around and hear from the trustees. I'm going to ask for public comment. We are not taking action at this meeting. It's going to occur at our business meeting at 7:30. So there's you won't hear people saying, I make a motion to approve. It's just an expression of support. So that's a little different than how we normally operate. For anyone that does want to speak from the public, we'll ask you to come to the microphone, speak very loudly into the microphone so that it can be picked up on the recording, state your name and address, and then your comment from there. So I think that that's all the housekeeping. Did you have a question about the housekeeping or the procedural? Okay.
Good evening.
Oh,
Thank
evening.
you. It's Mike Arno,
Okay. Yes.
3966 North Lake Drive.
Mhm.
Very happy with this wonderful meeting. Great
You got to talk louder. There.
presentation by the DOT.
Okay.
Is it possible to get the slides? And that's the only question.
Yes. They are actually available now online in our materials for this evening.
Great. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So, hi, trustee Lynn. We have a little musical chairs this evening. Great. Okay, so decision item 1. Oh, so for those of you who have just joined us, trustee Lynn, Mr. Bob had just completed the walk through the PowerPoint. And now we're going to march through each decision item. And I will facilitate from there. So decision item 1 is consideration of curb extensions or bump outs. So as you will recall, the Department of Transportation has indicated that they'll support the inclusion of bump outs at 5 key uncontrolled intersections within the project corridor. Those are shown in the attached illustrations as Edgewood, Menlo, Jarvis, Olive, and Kensington Boulevard. So Menlo and Jarvis were intersections that were identified in our transportation and parking analysis for recommended bump outs installation. So I look at that as a win-win. So with that, I'd like to open it up for discussion from trustees, questions or comments, support or lack thereof for this proposal. Trustee Arsing. A little quiet. Let's.
Anyways, okay, so I guess my questions are, if there's a bike lane, how do these affect the traffic of bikes? As well as, if there's parking on the east side of Lake, how many parking spots will we be looking to remove? But I feel like the slides you showed, I don't see any parking on the west side of the street. Is that the
direction we're moving in?
Correct.
No
There's no parking shown on the west side.
No parking shown on the west side. So how many then spots with these bump outs would we be removing on the east side of the street?
So that's a great question. At Edgewood, there's no parking allowed there, so no spaces would be allowed. At all the other locations, it's either 2 or 3. So let me cruise through those. And these are legal spaces that, not that there's some tiny gap where technically a car could illegally park. At Menlo, 2 spots would be lost. Jarvis is 3. Olive is 3 and Kensington is 2.
Okay. I mean, my personal feeling on this is I'm always for a bump out. I love bump outs. But I feel like if we're losing parking on the west side of the street and we're going to be losing about 10 parking spots on the east side of the street, close to Atwater, that's going to, I don't know, I think that's going to be a tough situation for those guests that are coming to Shorewood to visit our parks and the beach, and then they're gonna have to go into these off streets here. So I'd love to hear what everybody else thinks, but I mean, my first gut reaction is, Leanne.
I would just point out that during peak times of day, we do not allow parking in those areas to facilitate a left turn.
Okay,
So you would not have a net overall reduction of parking every hour of the day.
okay. Okay, great, thank you. And then how would this interact with the bike lane?
So looking at the example here, the bike lane just continues straight through. There's no interruption in.
Straight through, okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
Around trustee Stokebrand or trustee Kudo, trustee Lynn.
So just to kind of follow up on that same thing we're talking about, because I remember when we designed that area, we were looking at making sure people can make a left turn. So all the signage is just for the times. None of those places are all the time restricted. Because I can't remember exactly how bad. And I don't know if you're familiar with when you went through and looked at it, because at most intersections, there is a space that's designated as no parking in one way or another. And is it all time-based?
Typically that
needed?
occurs in the intersection proper.
Yeah,
I believe that the installation of these curb extensions may impact a space north and south leading into or out of the bump out because of the flare.
because of the lead. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Trustee Kudo? Trustee Stokebrand? Do you have any questions or comments related to decision item 1, the curb extensions?
No.
Okay. Public comment related to the curb extensions as presented?
I agree with the Bill Hunt, 3850 Lake Drive. I agree with what you were saying on I do think that Jarvis definitely needs to bump out. And I'm gonna tell you that it's gonna need the flashing lights too, because I live right there and I see that that's a mess, especially when Atwater's real busy. Menlo, like, nobody parks down there anyway.
Mhm.
Now that might change considering there's no more parking on the west side.
Mhm.
But I wouldn't worry about losing a spot there really. And I don't know how many people really park up by Kensington either. That I don't think you really, the other two
Mhm.
are bigger concerns of mine for that, but Jarvis needs something. It is kind of a mess. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Pendleton?
Good evening. I'm Sandy Pendleton. I live at 3529 North Frederick Avenue. I've lived in the village for over 30 years. I'm an attorney, business attorney. I'm very much interested in the economic viability and vitality of the village going forward. Referencing slide 12, the intersection at Olive Street there. Currently, as depicted there, that shows a cross on the north side of that intersection there. And I'm a little bit baffled. I share some of the concerns written in by other members of the community that there's not a crosswalk on the south side of that intersection as well. This is near Atwater Park. I don't see why, or I'd like to hear the DOT's perspective, why we can't have a crosswalk that cuts straight across there, but then in the bump out area, takes a slight dog leg south and then comes out without needing to remove the beautiful tree there. Beautiful tree there. It looks like you could connect to the sidewalk, cut straight across the terrace, do a slight diagonal there, and then cross straight over. So that would be my only question or comment on the bump out curb extension.
Thank you. All right, so given that, what's that? Oh, a response?
From my standpoint, it would be a challenge from an ADA standpoint, making sure all those grades work out. Usually you have guidelines as far as how steep the ramp is, then you need a level landing. So to work all those around and still get up to the sidewalk grade, could be an ADA challenge, and you might end up outside the guidelines.
I would echo, but also state that typically we try very hard for our vision impaired residents to match crossings at right angles. A sighted person could easily see that walk is taking a jog to the left or to the right. A vision impaired person would not know that, nor would they expect that.
Thank you.
The one thing I would like to add, Deborah Tarnell, wish that we do have the ability of adding that crosswalk, but it would come at the expense of that tree.
Thank you. Okay, so for purposes of, since we're taking a action at the business meeting, the motion in our packet will be to support the inclusion of these 5 bump outs at these 5 intersections. Am I hearing from the board that you are comfortable with that motion as presented, or do you want to go through each? I'd like to know what we're going into for the business meeting. So is there anyone that wants to remove any of these? Do you want to do a show of hands? I can go through Edgewood, Menlo, Jarvis, Olive, Kensington, if there's going to be some deviation from the 5 that are presented.
For your assistance, they are depicted, the bump out locations are depicted on the exhibit that we provide.
Mhm. So I guess wondering if the board is inclined to support all 5 of these, or if there's a deviation from that.
Well, I would just say I'm 100% in favor of Edgewood and Kensington capping either end of the village.
Mhm.
You know, the Jarvis makes sense. They have the double crossing areas there, so you need that bump out spanning both directions. I'm not beholden to Menlo or Olive. If other people are opposed to that, I mean, I think we could probably get away without doing those 2. There were 2 that we wanted to get rid of. But I mean, as I've expressed in previous meetings, I mean, I'm generally pro bump out, so if we're gonna do it, we might as well.
Trustee Kudo.
My only question would be Jarvis. So driving northbound on Lake Drive, I've had many opportunities, like the resident said, to get stuck in a long line of cars at Jarvis and Lake Drive. And more often than not, the only way to unstick that situation is to pass on the right, to go around. So what does that do for traffic flow? I mean, especially in the summertime when Atwater's packed, there's folks returning from work or whatever they happen to be doing on the northbound at Jarvis.
So that's a great question. Typically DOT, when they look at traffic operations, they look at level of service, and it has grades A through F, just like in school. And we did a study when the project started to look at a number of years ago, the village removed the outside through lanes beyond the Capitol Drive intersection and made that parking. We looked at how does that operate today? And like Leanne said, from 4 to 6 p.m., there is no parking allowed, kind of like where this bump out is proposed at Jarvis, which allows people to bypass left turning vehicles. And the analysis we did looking at the road diet of the project did not factor that in. And the through traffic on Lake Drive still operate at a level of service B. So the department has reviewed that information and has determined that there's no adverse impact to traffic flow.
Again, I would respectfully disagree, but that's okay. I mean, that would be my only concern, would be that. I mean, it's.
Can you make sure you're speaking in because trustee Stokebrand is having a hard time hearing?
I would love to talk to Kathy directly. That would be my only concern, would be the northbound flow of traffic past Jarvis, going past Jarvis on Lake Drive. I mean, I recognize that there's a no parking situation there now at particular times, and that does allow for that passing, but no such thing would exist with a bump out. It would be a
Correct.
permanent installment.
So I should probably clarify it. Would it be better that traffic could bypass? Sure, but without it, it still operates at a level of service B, which the department feels is acceptable. We also heard a lot coming out of the last public meeting about traffic calming and ways to slow down traffic in the corridor. So this would be another tool to try to reduce through traffic speeds.
I would just add too, like, even if you're stuck there for the length of an entire light, that's 2 minutes, you know, and it feels like a lot when you're in the driver's seat. And I know, and I mean, I get it because I used to come home that way every day for like several years. But when you're stuck behind somebody like that, the actual amount of time is usually less than it feels like, you know, when you're in the driver's seat. So I would rather sacrifice somebody taking 2, maybe even 4 minutes of even sitting practically still in that area to allow more pedestrian crossing there, especially since we know more people are going to be parking on these side streets and crossing there with their families. I would just rather the cars just slow down, even if they have to stop for a little bit. So, which is just an opinion. That's just a pure opinion.
Trustee Stokebrand?
Thank you. I guess I can see traffic backing up to the Capitol intersection, Capitol Drive, and I just wonder, you know, from the police department standpoint, what they're going to do. Because I mean, it's definitely, it's a bottleneck, but I don't see how you make it safe without those bump outs for pedestrians to cross. I just think that, you know, it's one or the, it's just something we have to do for pedestrian safety. And we're gonna have to figure out what we do when people are stuck in Capitol Drive and Lake and they can't make the light. But that's for the transportation engineers, not for me. But I see it backing up all the way to Capitol.
But you're in support of the bump out at Jarvis?
I
Just like
am.
that. Okay, thank you.
I mean, I actually, honestly, I would like a little more time to, I don't know, I'm curious about the public information campaign here. I would like to, this is my neighborhood, so I would literally like to go door to door. And I didn't have time to do that between Thursday. If this was out earlier, my apologies. But I would really like to get some more feedback. Did the people in this corridor get a postcard or an email or a phone call, or did this just come out on Thursday, or?
It came out on Thursday.
Okay, so I'd like a little more time to talk to the people in my neighborhood to see what they think about this. I understand that, you know, you want these decisions tonight, but I'm not ready to vote until I've talked to more people who live in the neighborhood. And I just think that this is something we're going to live with for 20 to 30 years, probably. It's a huge change. And I would like a little more time to survey my neighbors. Thank you.
Okay, when we come to the part of the business meeting, somebody can make a motion to defer. Okay, comments from the public? Mr. Hunt?
So to your point, why don't you just put a sign, there's a no left turn? There's no left turn, like between such and such. You have that by the school, by the cleaners.
Mhm.
You have one like right away. I forget the name of that street that when you turn left onto Capitol
Morris. Mhm.
and it's right there. You can't turn there at certain times.
Richfield.
I think that would probably solve that because I don't like bump outs. But I think it needs it.
Mhm.
And I think, but as far as like, you could get, I don't really see a big need for Kensington and I don't see a big need for Edgewood really,
Mhm.
because they're They're just not
I appreciate
traversed really. But the Menlo one, is that where the hits a preserve or not?
Mhm.
So that could be because there are
Right.
people who do that. So that's.
Appreciated. Okay,
I would have
Okay.
no problem with this bump out if there was a no left turn signal.
okay, well, that will be a separate,
Thank you.
that's an ordinance change. So might I remind you as while we may want to brainstorm other solutions, we're being asked to consider these things tonight in front of us, but to your point, we would have to handle that separately. Director Buchlik?
I'm just curious, would that be something under the purview or review of DOT? Restricting northbound left turns?
Yes, that would be something that department would need to review as part of its operations, evaluate.
And so is that something that we would need to make a motion on tonight or come back separately?
I think that's something we can do just with a normal request or
Okay.
your normal conversations.
Okay. All right. Other opinions? I mean, where I'm going with this is I don't want to get to the business meeting and have 14 motions and amending motions, and things like that. So if there's other consensus around, did you want to reduce the number of curb extensions, trustee Ursink?
You know, I think I'm fine with what's being proposed.
The 5?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, moving on to decision item 2. Direction regarding uncontrolled intersection crosswalks, location and marking type. So the staff is recommending that the village board consider marking crosswalks in the ladder style at the following key intersections. They are the exact same 5 intersections where the curb extensions are proposed: Edgewood, Menlo, Jarvis, Olive, and Kensington. Trustees, questions, comments regarding the 5 proposed crosswalks? Trustee Ursink?
Can you remind me, are these crosswalks we've already approved for markings in past meeting? Like
No.
a recent meeting, we discussed signage, right? For crosswalks on Lake Drive?
We did as
Oh.
part of the traffic and parking request program. We currently, not marking, but signage.
Signage.
So
Yeah.
there's signage indicating crosswalks at all of the intersections.
Are these basically the same intersections? Are these?
No, this is a reduced number of intersections.
Okay.
For crosswalk markings,
For marked
but the
crosswalks.
signs can stay there. We might want to remove.
No, I wouldn't recommend you leave a crosswalk sign at an intersection without a marked crosswalk.
that. Okay, so does that help you, trustee Ursink?
I'm just a bit confused on what we've approved already and to now what we're
Right.
asking to look at and how that all works together. See, it's kind of seeming like a little bit of a mismatch here.
Yeah, thank you for
So
asking to
I just want to
clarify.
make sure we're consistent and we have kind of a clarity on,
Mhm.
on the whole project.
So I think perhaps the best way to look at it is you approved for signage for the current road configuration. That road configuration will cease to exist at the point of the Wistow
Construction.
construction. So anything that you approved for the current road configuration ceases at the point construction begins and we start over.
And have we already spent that money? For that signage? As the
Yes.
signage already gone up? We've already spent the money, the
Yep.
sign's already gone up and that'll only be present until 2025.
Correct. We'll take them down and reuse them.
Wow. Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. So yes, so to repeat, the current configuration is the replace in kind alternative, which is no longer on the table. So anything that we've done for this configuration currently may or may not exist after. That's right. Okay, trustee Stokebrand.
So then the proposal is to put the uncontrolled intersection ladder crosswalk at those 5 bump outs.
Yes,
But it's not necessarily on both sides of them, like, for example, Olive. Because we've gone through the Olive thing and it would not be a perpendicular. So,
mhm.
so there's some that it's not. And I guess I'm wondering so if you're driving safety wise, and I think I was trying to get through the emails and I may not be elucidating this accurately, but one of the residents was concerned that if you have sort of seemingly random crosswalk ladders, will drivers be less likely to pay attention to them and see them? And I don't know, I'm no traffic engineer.
Could we direct that to the professionals here?
Sure.
Okay.
Very good question. And what we have seen throughout our history is that less is more. Meaning if you have, I even saw it in one recently come my way here, if you have crosswalks like these, the high visibility crosswalks, every couple feet, drivers will learn to ignore those crosswalks versus if you have one that all of a sudden shows up less frequently, it draws their attention to it, something changed. Why is there a change? And it actually increases their alertness to it. So that ties into the flashing beacons as well. The state standard is to only use them when needed, because with overuse comes complacency.
Thank you.
So I guess that's where I'm having trouble parsing bump outs, uncontrolled intersections, and the RRFBs. Because it seems to me like you kind of need to look at them all together. Like for Jarvis, for example, if we keep the 2 crosswalks at Jarvis, which I believe is in the plan, one on the north end of the intersection, one on the south end. So then does that mean that there are 4 rapid flashing rectangular RRFBs? One for each direct.
I'm sorry. Yes, that is correct. You would have 2 sets at that location, one on the east side of the road and a beacon on the west side of the road at each crossing. So you'd have a total of 4 signals or beacons.
And so that would be sort of like what we just eliminated at Metro Market, right? We had,
Right. So we could, as a board, we could recommend that there just be 1 crosswalk at Jarvis. Would that be, we could do that, right? Or you wouldn't recommend that?
And we'd be funding the beacons. Wista
Yeah.
would not be funding the beacons. That would be
Right.
Village.
Yes, ma'am. To answer your question, that's why we're here tonight to discuss with you how many is that WISDOT does not provide crosswalk markings at unsignalized intersections. And so we are deferring to the village and your residents to determine where those crossings occur. So yes, there's a lot of flexibility in where and how.
but you want an answer tonight, right?
We're hoping, well.
That's what the opportunity is, trustee Stokbrand, but we can defer.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on, just to see, is there
Sorry,
support for all
I had
5?
one more question. I apologize. So
Yes.
I'm not clear, how many do we not have ADA ramps planned at every corner for this? Or do we?
The way we currently have this plan, there will be an ADA ramp along the west side sidewalk from the south side of the corridor to the north side of the corridor. So at every side street, there will be an ADA ramp. What we are, kind of why we're here tonight, is to get feedback as to how many ADA ramps to put in the east-west direction.
And what was the pay, what
That's
was the
really what
payment?
we're going after is how many, because they cost money to be put in and we need to know for our estimating where we're.
What's the payment model on those ADA ramps? Is that the 80/20?
Yes, that would be the ADA. Yes, that's the 80/20. Yes, ma'am.
So it would seem to me that you'd have to have at least one east-west ADA ramp at every intersection, wouldn't you?
That's you don't,
We don't have that currently.
yes.
We don't?
No. Currently, they have 5 primary crossing points. Currently, we have 7 that have a marked crosswalk. So Beverly and Marion aren't included on the current proposal on the current map that's in front of us, which is probably reasonable, but that's where it is at this point.
Deb, would WISDOT approve the installation of an ADA ramp for an east or a crossing of Lake Drive? So a pedestrian moving from east to west or west to east, if there were not a marked crosswalk?
Yes, ma'am, we would.
So you would allow a ped ramp without a marked walk?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if I'd want that, though. That would be risky.
Is a ped ramp the same as an ADA ramp?
Yes. That's what you have today. You have you have access and ramps, and not all of them are marked.
And not all of them are what? Marked? Oh, the street. The ramps are there.
Correct.
Trustee Kudo?
So I'm looking at the installation costs. Leanne, can you talk to us or tell us a little bit about what the long-term maintenance costs would be for high visibility? So it's 2,000, it looks like it says 2,000 per crossing. But in order to maintain that, is there every 3 to 5 years?
Every 3 to 5 years, it needs to be remarked. It costs approximately twice as much to mark a ladder style than a traditional, which is the 2 solid single lines. Previously, this board has directed our department to mark crossings in the ladder style because of the high visibility nature. So that has become our new standard.
Okay. I mean, I guess I'm sort of at the point where if we're gonna do this, just let's do it correctly. Let's use high visibility. I mean, I don't see why this doesn't seem worth trying to cut a corner on to save some money. In my perspective.
Yeah, I think
agree.
Yeah, I think I support all 5 crosswalk markings as presented, except for at Jarvis, since we just eliminated a situation like that on Oakland, so I'm wondering why we would do it on Lake Drive. So that part doesn't make sense to me. So that's the one change that I would propose, is to have one marking at Jarvis instead of the north and south markings.
And I would make it on the south, closer to the beach.
Mm-hmm. That would be, I support that.
Can you restate that? I'm trying to look at
So-
it and envision it.
Yeah, it's right up there on the slide.
So you would get rid of which
The-
crossing?
We would have that one.
This is the one you'd get rid of, is what I heard trustee Stokbrand say. She was proposing for the south side, which
Yeah.
is right here.
I'll say, I mean, what I would say there, this goes back to the left-hand turn. Is that they're going to be, if we don't get rid of the left-hand turn, we don't work with DOT to get rid of it. There's going to be a bunch of cars.
It's
stacked,
going to be a nightmare.
turning left through a pedestrian crossing.
Mhm.
Yep, that makes sense.
So how do we?
I don't think
resolve-
that's-
And
think
I would
that's any
also
safer.
ask this, if we only use the southbound or the south half crosswalk there, and we eliminate the northern side crosswalk, would that also reduce the length of that bump out and possibly add another parking space?
No, because of the driveway.
No, because of the driveway. Okay, yeah, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I see.
Director Creepenchog?
Just to clarify, the one that's removed at the Metro Market was done because of the turning movements out of the parking garage. Not because it wasn't warranted to have two crosswalks. It was that one crosswalk was seen as conflicting with turning. So
Thank
I would
you.
argue this is somewhat different situation.
I would wholeheartedly agree. that
Okay, then,
This is not a good comparison
oh,
for reasons of eliminating a crosswalk. That was done for a very specific purpose.
okay. So in this case, you think having two is warranted?
I do,
Okay.
but that's my professional opinion.
I would defer to that. So thank you for making that distinction. I withdraw my recommendation to have one crosswalk marking at Jarvis. Given that those are apples and oranges, I would just go with as presented. If anyone disagrees with that, please state so now.
Well, I guess the point is, it's sort of like the stop sign question from the parking and transportation study. The more you have, the less people pay attention.
But at the same time, having a crosswalk at each leg of an intersection is normal and expected.
Okay. I think that, this is just we're creating a huge bottleneck for northbound traffic in rush hour. And that's just, to me, this has become, it's going to be a traffic enforcement problem for the police department. And that's kind of where we have to go with the discussion.
But recognize that is the intent of traffic calming.
Is to create bottlenecks to avoid that. So let me ask this procedurally. If the only way that this board can accept this, specifically this intersection, the way it's proposed, is to make it a no left turn intersection, can we address that tonight in some way? Or because we can also defer it and come back in 2 weeks, but that's what we need to.
Can we make a recommendation that WISDOT goes back and really examines that? And that would be like the recommendation from Sherwood would be, this would be most effective as a no left turn. And
That
then
would
make
be
it come back.
Seems like procedurally that would be a solution.
I don't know if it would stop me from voting for this, but it would
Mhm.
definitely encourage my vote. It would
Mhm.
encourage me to vote for this even,
Right.
this solution.
Yes, trustee Gudo.
I mean, I guess my concern would be, WISDOT goes back, we make the recommendation, WISDOT goes back and says, don't agree with the recommendation, we're gonna keep it as, left turn allowable. We have a bump out here, and now we've got the same traffic problem that we've been talking about for half an hour. I mean, I'm assuming WISDOT can't give a guarantee that they're gonna, tonight or in 2 weeks, that they would go through and analyze this and determine that we could put up a no left turn sign.
Mhm.
So this is sort of a chicken and the egg situation for me.
Right. So I think the only thing that we do is make a recommendation, because for this matter, we could approve, we could say, don't put a curb extension there, and it's their road, they could still do it. So all we can do is make recommendations, whether it's tonight or in 2 weeks. That's all. Okay. I think I'm gonna- yes.
I will say that if the feedback we receive is to put no curb extension at Jarvis, we would support that,
Okay.
or any of the others for that matter. If you only
If-
wanted to have one on each end,
Mhm.
we would support that. If you want to have none, we will support that. We're really, what we're trying to communicate tonight is we are deferring to the village to have an input in kind of, I guess, in a sense, tell us, what would you like it to look like? We have no opinion one way or the other.
Mhm.
But
Yes,
that doesn't carry over to the no left turn, right? That's just for the pump out.
Correct.
And what would be the process back at DOT for determining whether or not we could put a sign up for no left turns?
I would need to talk to our operations department as to whether or not they would approve that on a state highway, and, you know,
Is there a timetable on something like that? I honestly have no
I
idea.
would like to say I could turn it around, and get you an answer right away, but I don't know.
Okay.
Without going back to the office, you know, there's a very good possibility I could have an answer for you before your next board meeting.
Okay.
That's good.
I respect.
So it seems like that's what we should probably do on that one.
One
Yes.
last point, just with Jarvis having the two crosswalks. At least in my mind, I've been just mostly very focused on the northbound traffic, but it would be nice to stop southbound traffic ahead of the intersection as well there. So the double crosswalk, I think is totally, I'm totally okay with that. And I'm okay with all the other markings.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to be heard on this matter? This is crosswalks only. Oh, no, bump outs. Where are we?
We're on cross.
We are, thank God. Okay. Anyone that needs to be heard who has not already been heard? Okay, I am going to try to move things along because we are now at 7:05 and we need to get through all this. So decision item 3, rectangular reflective flashing beacons, otherwise known as RRFB. There are 2 that are proposed at our cost. Menlo Boulevard, there would be 1 set there. In Jarvis Street, there would be 2 sets.
Correct.
Correct. Questions, comments from the board? Thumbs up.
Are the 2 sets, those are absolutely necessary to have 2 sets at one intersection? Like, I guess if you're coming from south or north, you're gonna still press the button for that to go. It just seems.
I think we would have them,
Yeah, but
you want them both ways, and the only reason there's one at Menlo is because it's only crossing at
one way, yeah. I'm just trying to envision it.
I just-
And the other question that I have for Leanne is, with these, if Villager is paying for these, if you hit the button on the one side, will it go on both sides? Will the flashing happen on both sides of the street?
Just to make sure I understand, are you referring to both intersections?
No, so the east and west side of the
Yes.
streets. So if I hit the button on the west side of the street, would both lights flash on the west and the east side of the street?
The answer is yes.
At
Okay.
the same at the same crosswalk
Yeah.
you are at?
Yeah.
But the other crosswalk would not?
That is
The
correct.
the north one. for
Right,
instance.
that's right.
So if I'm at the south intersection, I hit the west button, it's not gonna just pop above my head, it's gonna go on both sides of the street.
Correct.
All right.
That
I
is
ju-
correct.
I just asked because the one on Olive does not, or the one on Wilson does not do that.
That's because it's not working correctly.
Is that the truth?
Okay,
We're
like-
having.
Let's
we're having
take that
s-
offline.
Sorry.
Offline. Different street,
We're having some issues.
different street.
Not how it should go.
We're staying on Lake Drive. I will not entertain any other discussion about a roadway.
Okay.
So just to be clear, if I'm at the intersection of Jarvis and Lake and I'm at the north crosswalk and I want to go from west to east and I push the button and the rapid flashing beacon goes off for that northern crossing, does it also set off the lights on the southern one to give notice to the northbound traffic?
No, that it would not. It would only be the one set. But you can see it in both directions.
Aaron, could we not wire it so it worked that way?
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
could reach
saying,
out
like-
to Capco and check on that, but you would think potentially with the push button, you could wire it so all 4 of them would go off.
Because otherwise you could end up with a car. I mean, they're supposed to be going, 30, but they're going 40 to 50 miles an hour on Lake Drive. So, someone could be well into that intersection. I don't know.
Mhm.
I believe that we should be able to make it operate in that manner.
So it'd be a
Mhm.
4-way flashing beacon.
Right.
So it'd be all 4 locations, it would be flashing.
Mhm.
Correct.
So bringing it back, the question is, do you support the beacons at these two intersections as proposed. Or you don't. Those are the choices.
Support.
Support. Okay. Comments from the public? Nope. Okay. We've bored you into submission here. That's good. It's a good sign. All right, decision item number 4, approval of concurrence with the advanced schedule. Trustee Ursink.
This question for Leanne. I know we are working on our north project.
Into your mic.
Sorry. 2025, we will be removing and replacing North Oakland in Shorewood. I could imagine
Not if we build Lake Drive in 2025.
we're gonna push that off.
We would have to defer that by a year.
Which, do we ask them to defer for a year, or do we want to defer ours for a year? What's the
I
best?
think the issue, as I understand it, and Deb can certainly jump in here, because this project was scoped with an advanceable let, which means it was scheduled for a particular budget biennium, and WISDOT has the ability to move it back and forth between the years within that biennium. As it's advanceable, the only way to lock in the schedule is to lock it in at the earliest date, which is 2025. But my understanding is that we have no ability to lock in 2026.
Your understanding is correct.
So it's 2025 or 2027? Is that what you're saying? Which
It
is the
sounds like
next,
2025 is the only date. And
go to
this-
the- or you go to the next biennium, right?
Well, I don't know that we have the ability to make that choice. That would be a high level WISDOT decision.
Because quite honestly, you know, we paid to redo Lake Drive in 2018 and it's in wonderful condition.
Yeah, the
That was
ability,
only that was only resurfacing, and it was on the condition that WISDOT was gonna tear it up no matter what we did. That's the only reason they approved it the first time.
Right, but I'm just saying we paid for it and it's in great shape.
Point taken.
And North Oakland Avenue is in terrible condition.
Point taken. Trustee Kudo.
But I mean, but there's. Trustee Stokely, I don't think there's any guarantee that WISDOT will have that funding in the next biennium budget. It seems as though we have it now. It goes 25 or 26. They've chosen 25. To push it beyond that would require, I imagine.
An act of God.
there is no option to push it to 2027.
Yeah.
Because the program is budgeted out minimum of 5 years.
So to be clear, there is not a leverage option here for Shorewood. It is 2025
Or flexibility.
or flexibility, which really puts us in a bind in terms of moving Oakland ahead. We have to lock in order to manage our other projects, like it or not. So with that,
Doesn't
Is
seem
there-
like there's a real decision here, right?
there's not a good decision.
There's
No, there's a sort of,
Just a comment though, but I think also a positive of locking it in is that it does give your business district an ability to plan.
Mhm.
One of the reasons why we started design on North Oakland so early was to get that design established so that we could also have greater prediction for the businesses in terms of what road closure looked like and staging. It also gave them availability to review that plan and then take an additional year to plan amongst the businesses themselves in order to, and how to proceed.
100%.
So that's a strong advantage that I see for the business district.
Mhm.
100%. I think the disadvantage is the street is
Yes.
That's right, but that's,
is dangerous at this point, you know?
well, yeah, we're
I mean,
gonna
some
have
of the
to work
bike
on it.
lanes are, it's
Right, but
just,
that's not a point of discussion. I mean, this is emotional at this point.
Okay.
Because there is no choice.
you're right. I'm just saying.
Mhm. If there is a point, if we can establish, is there some type of hardship, criteria that we could establish to make a difference in this? Like the condition of another road? I don't think so. That's why I don't want to take time to discuss something that's not gonna,
Well, I mean, I
Impact.
don't even know why it's on this slide if it's not even discussable,
that's
really.
right.
I don't know why we're discussing it. It's 2025.
It's the illusion of power. They're giving us the illusion of power.
Gotcha. Okay.
Well,
Okay, let's pull it back here.
I would like to just clarify that you have a choice. There is a decision to be made, and it may not be what you consider to be a choice, a good choice either way, but the reason we're bringing it before you tonight is because you have the choice of a 2026 construction with an advanceable of 2025, or you lock it into 2025 when you know it's going to be constructed.
And then we can manage our life around that. The other option does not, it
Kind
means
of creates chaos.
it can create some chaos. The other option is we finance the entire thing ourselves, which,
Not it.
okay. So there are actually three options.
Again, the
So
illusion of
given that
power.
there are three options, locking in is my choice. What's the Ursink?
Lock it in.
Lock it
Yeah.
in.
Lock it in.
I mean,
Uh,
there's no choice.
There's no
We have to
choice
lock it
here.
in.
Okay,
I just, yeah, there's no choice.
We
Okay.
can't plan around maybe
right.
for Oakland, so.
No.
Mhm. Exactly. Okay. So moving on, we are getting to the decision item 5. We have 15 minutes left. This is what everybody's been waiting for. Endorsement of a preferred typical section. I'm going to start out by saying that, let me, for those of you at home, we went from having a shared bike lane option to, with keeping the parking on both sides, to getting parking removed. So that was not an option. So then we moved to a dedicated bike lane, which I thought was a win. And then as of last week, we understood that there's an option for a protected bike lane. So what I want everyone to understand is that up until last week, we didn't consider a protected bike lane at all. That's not something that we had talked about. So it's not something that we dealt with internally on what that would mean, because we didn't think it was an option. Given that it is an option, sounds great, but when it comes to the practicality and the reality of it, having a protected bike lane at the curb creates an additional visibility challenge for the residences that have to ingress and egress out of their driveways along that street. It also, so we would be knowingly putting that additional visibility challenge in place that would operate every day, 24/7. It would potentially block that bike lane when cars needed to pull out to try to see past the parking lane. In addition, from a maintenance aspect, it creates a corridor where leaves and snow get caught, and we do not have the deployment capacity to keep that area clear and passable under all conditions, seasonal conditions. So the reality is that while it sounds really great, in practicality, it isn't something that we can commit to maintaining. We can't say that we can maintain it. We actually can't. And it also creates a visibility issue for the neighbors. So while we haven't talked to all the neighbors, we know that would exist. So I want to just say that right out. It may steal a lot of thunder. However, I think that it's important that we just understand that moving in. So because of that, staff is recommending a buffered 5-foot bike lane with parking at the curb as the alternative, the preferred alternative. But at this time, I would like to hear from trustees as far as questions, comments, and public comment. But I just thought I'd lay it out there just so we know kind of what we're dealing with before we get too carried away. Trustee Ursing?
I wasn't raising my hand, but I would go along with staff recommendation of buffered 5-foot parking lane, or 5-foot bike lane with buffered 5-foot bike lane with parking at the curb.
Trustee Lynn?
So I have a number of opinions, but I'll try to be brief. So I'm okay with both buffered bike lane options. I'm equally okay with both. On a personal standpoint, I actually don't like the bike lanes at the curbs. When I'm biking, I find I don't like having to come out through the parked cars to get back into the road to turn left. And on this street in particular, you're only ever turning left through the village off of the northbound way. Now that's just me. I'm a very confident biker, so I take the road. And I know understand that not everybody's like that. So some people certainly feel more safe on the inside along the curb. But that being said, both of these buffered options are technically considered protected bike lanes because of that buffer. Both are an enormous improvement. Just to touch on what you said we're starting from the combined lanes, but that's not entirely true.
It was
We're
a
really
fog
starting
lane.
from, what we're really starting from is 4 lanes of traffic.
True.
That's what this used to be until 2019. And we only got rid of we only created the parking lane and created the fog line in the first place on the condition that DOT was going to change it no matter what in 2025. So I have a lot invested in this project in particular and the current design, but I am okay 50-50 either way with either of these protected bike lanes because they both are protected. They're both better than any other alternative we've ever seen on Lake Drive. And given this street, there isn't an extremely clear benefit to the bike lane on the curb. Most often when you see a bike lane on the curb, it's in a place like a downtown where there's a constant stream of parked cars and a constant stream of traffic, or it's in a situation where both bike lanes going both directions are on one side and they're on the other side of the cars. Very rarely do you see it like this. So I'm okay, truly, again, 100% either way, 50-50. I'm fine with either option. And that's, I'll cut myself off.
Well, way to land the plane. But Trustee Lee and I just want to take a moment to say I really appreciate your experience, your institutional knowledge, and your passion on this because you have been in painstakingly detailed meetings for years. So hats off. Thank you.
Many public forums.
Many public forums. Trustee Kudo, just kind of going around the horn.
Yeah, I just agree with Trustee Lynn.
Perfect. That's what I want to hear. Trustee Stokebrand.
If I could just, like the maintenance issue, is it because we don't have a small plow?
It's both equipment and capacity deployment.
Meaning staff.
Yes.
So if there's cars parked in the parking lane, we don't have a small enough piece of equipment to plow that little bike lane
Mm-hmm.
or the staff to do it.
Both.
But if we had still been cleaning the sidewalks, never mind.
I'll bring back, hey, you want to bring back snow removal on the sidewalks? I am all for it. But that is not part of our scope of discussion.
I'm just trying to understand the public works.
You're right. We could bring out that little plow again for the sidewalk plow.
I was just trying to understand the resistance from the public works.
It's not resistance.
Well,
Actually,
whatever you'd call it. Something saying we don't want to do it. We can't do it.
No, it's not a want. It's a,
We can't do it.
right.
Public
And it's
works
equipment,
can't do it.
right,
Equipment and staff.
Equipment and staff.
right. So if we approve that design, we would then need to approve additional equipment and staff to maintain it if it is the expectation that it be maintained all 4 seasons. Moving on. Any questions for public comment? Mr. Hunt?
Yeah, so as far as like the protected bike lane thing, I was just in Copenhagen over the July,
Sounds nice.
and people getting out on the passenger side are probably gonna get run over by bikers left and right. You're just not thinking about it. You're there. And plus, like you brought up, a vision of seeing like past those cars, if you're even in between cars, which people will do, and some bikers cruising around, it's gonna be ugly. But I have a question. How big is like a big truck? How wide is a big truck? Big semi? Like how much?
Are they
room do
allowed
you
on-
need? Huh?
Are they allowed on Lake Drive?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
yes, they are. It's a state highway. They're allowed. Typically, no.
I don't know offhand.
Okay.
I think the standard is like 8 feet plus the mirrors.
Well, my issue is if you're gonna allow, you had 6 feet for a bike lane. And now you're doing 5 feet, now it's like 3 feet for the buffered, right?
Yes, sir.
So now you're taking away 2 feet of road. There's like big cars, there's big trucks that go by there. In winter time, when the road's narrow. I feel like, 6 feet's plenty of room for a biker to have. I wouldn't want to cut down on any more sizable like width for these cars. And sometimes a car sees somebody, and especially a biker. And I know because the bikers like to ride on the inside of that lane, I think it's because of the slope thing. And people will make such an effort to go around them. That you need more road in that middle strip. You don't want people going past that middle strip. You gotta avoid that as much as you can.
Thank you.
So I think that the 6 foot wide, no buffer, I think
Right.
6 feet's plenty.
Okay.
That's my bet. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Mr. Pendleton.
Thank you. Okay, so, as you know, president of Greater Shore Bikers, we're the local cycling advocacy group. We think that being a bicycle-friendly and pedestrian-friendly community is Shorewood's competitive, sustainable advantage. It is why young, talented, or educated people are going to choose Shorewood over other places. We are lagging behind other communities, other benchmark communities when it comes to bicycle infrastructure, okay? Milwaukee has several streets that have protected bike lanes on them. How many streets does Shorewood have with protected bike lanes? None, 0, zip. That is, I would say, embarrassing for a village that prides itself on being a great place to raise a family, to bike around the town with a family, or to get to school or shopping using a bike. Lake Drive is one of our most highly visible streets. It's the one street that many people who live outside of our village see, okay? How we design that street sends a very important message to other people, to visitors, about what type of community this is. If we have outdated, less than ideal bike infrastructure on Lake Drive, that tells visitors we're an outdated community. We are not on the cutting edge of protecting cyclists. So I appreciate the president's passing along comments of staff. I would like to address some of them. Cyclists understand that the world, when it comes to snow on bike trails or bike paths, or leaves on bike trails or bike paths, often is out of their control. They're used to dynamic situations. I fully understand, as someone who bikes regularly on Lake Drive and the Oakley Trail, that there's going to be some number of days every year, 10 days, 15, 20 days, where that's not a clean, clear pavement, okay?
The point that we were trying to make is it's not 10 days or 15 or 20 days. It's once it starts snowing, never.
So we have equipment, I understand, that goes and clears the path in River Park. We have equipment that goes and clears the path at Atwater Park, for instance. It clears paths around schools, for example, the playground and the sidewalks on playground. So if we don't have the equipment, I would be in favor of this village acquiring. Also, there is the ability to declare snow emergencies or establish other regulations in our books so that there aren't cars parked on Lake Drive during a snow emergency, and the regular plows can come right through and clear the snow. This is not an insurmountable problem. It's a problem that Chicago has solved, Minneapolis has solved, New York City has solved. It's a problem that we can solve, and it's a problem that I would suggest is not economically insurmountable. So I think that we can, and we have to remember, we're talking about a 5-foot bike lane Next, if we do a protected bike, which is what I'm advocating for. Okay. If we put a 5-foot bike lane next to the curb, there's then a 3-foot buffer, and then there's a parking car, right? So let's say somebody puts their leaves out 2 feet into Lake Drive. Unfortunately, they're not supposed to, but let's say they do. That still leaves a large amount of space for the cyclist to get down that roadway. So again, that's a certain number of days a year, but it's not an insurmountable problem for cyclists. It's not an insurmountable problem for our village staff. They're very creative people. I realize they're understaffed. I realize they're under-resourced, but let's properly staff it, properly resource it, and create world-class bike infrastructure in our village. That's what we aspire to be not just a bronze level or a silver level bike-friendly community, but gold or platinum, which we should be if we want to attract people. The visibility issue, important issue, and I'm glad you brought it up, President McKay. Let me address that directly. If people are pulling out of their driveway, they're living on the east side of Lake Drive, and they're pulling out of their driveway, putting the bike lane next to the curb gives them a much better view of, and makes bicyclists more visible to them, right? So rather than them pulling out past parked cars, and then lo and behold, there's a bike in the bike lane, maybe hidden by a pickup truck, maybe hidden by a tall SUV. Okay, so putting the bike lane next to the curb improves sight lines, at least for those cars pulling out. Now, is there the possibility, as staff has mentioned, that a car might pull out, block temporarily bike while they're waiting for traffic to clear? Let's say they're wanted to turn right and go north. Cyclists deal with this type of dynamic traffic situation all the time. And quite frankly, all the years I've biked on Lake Drive, going north up to Clody Park, how many times have I had a car pull out for me from a driveway? I can count it on one hand. It's just such a rare thing. People on Lake Drive, maybe they don't live in that house year round. I mean, I just don't. It's not like we have big apartment buildings on Lake Drive where we've got a constant stream of cars pulling out of those driveways. It's very rare. Anybody who bikes on Lake Drive knows it's very rare. This is simply not a problem for cyclists. Now, it may be something that people on Lake Drive who live on that side are concerned about, but again, as we engage in traffic calming methods, it's going to be a negotiation. It's going to be an adjustment to our culture as people decide how to deal with a traffic calm Lake Drive. It will no longer be designed and configured as an expressway. It'll no longer be I-43 East. It'll be something much better, much safer. And I submit to you that it would be much better and much safer if it has protected bike lanes, parking protected bike. And I do hope that we can get a final point. If they can have bike lanes in New York City, in Chicago, very dynamic traffic environments, right? Certainly, we in Shorewood, on the much more prosaic Lake Drive, can successfully have a protected bike. And that's why I asked for your support of that. Or, in the alternative, I think from a process standpoint, this should have first gone to the Parks and Public Spaces Committee and asked for the Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Subcommittee to weigh in on this issue and give the public an opportunity to weigh in on this. We shouldn't just make this decision solely based on what staff says or the DPW says. It should be.
No.
I'm sorry.
We're not.
Good. I suggest it should be more organic process. And again, I thank you very much for your service and for considering the thoughts of I put forth here. Thanks.
Thanks.
How do you feel about curb extensions?
I'm in favor of.
The curb extensions at Jarvis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I-
Let me answer the question.
I did, can I just quick follow-up?
Yes.
So there's two models here, the inside of the curb and the outside of the curb. Are you that much more opposed to the outside of the curb, outside of the parked cars? Because it sounds like you're very passionate about the the protected bike lane, which I think we can all agree on. But is there a reason why you're not in favor of the parked cars on the curb and the protected bike lane next to parked cars?
So there's four options, slides 17, 18, 19, 20. My group, and I think most of the people who've written to you, are in favor of option 4, which is on slide 20, which would be travel lane, parking lane,
That one right there behind. you.
buffered lane, and then the bike lane. So the other option is not a protected bike, right? Because that's just paint. That's not a protected bike. A protected bike lane means it has bollards, or it has a parking lane, or it has those
curb or something.
aardvarks, curbs, or what do you call the aardvarks?
The tables?
Like bumpers.
Yeah, bumpers, that kind of naturally, when a car strays into that, they feel a vibration and they naturally move over.
Is that part of this slide here? Because you were just talking about plowing the whole street, but if we have those things, then that's essentially just paint too. And I think that's just paint right now, right? This lane is just paint too.
Paint
That
to a
is correct.
parking lane.
It's all paint.
It's all
It's
paint.
all paint.
Both
There's no
lanes are
bollards.
paint.
There's no bollards that's being suggested. And again, we're only talking about the east side. We're not talking about the west side
Right.
of Lake Drive. We're only suggesting a protected bike lane be put in on the east side, where you have a lot of bikes, say, going up on a Saturday to Port Washington, or
Mhm.
kids going up to Atwater Park, who we want to keep off the sidewalk. We
Mhm.
want them to feel safe biking on the street.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, did I answer your question?
Well, so I understand you're passionate about this one, but we have a very similar model too that, I mean, is that a middle ground here? Or are you adamantly opposed to the other this model right here?
He's adamantly
Slide
opposed.
19. I think that's, so as Bob Burns, former general counsel of Trek Bicycle, said in his email to you all today, bike lanes, conventional bike lanes are better than no bike lanes at all. Yes, but protected bike lanes are far more better than just conventional bike lanes.
Okay.
So as I mentioned to you, I put together a one-pager on the 16 reasons why Shorewood should adopt protected bike lanes. Copies of those are in the back, and I've emailed those to you. And we've also put together, my organization has put together a summary of the research and studies that talk about the many benefits of protected bike lanes over just conventional bike lanes, and the popularity of them and the safety of them.
Mhm.
Protected bike lanes save lives. That's a good reason to have it.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we are past time, past 7:30. So I want to wrap things up. I want to make two distinctions. I want to be clear, we are not making decisions just based on staff. And guess what? Even if we wanted to do that, that is not a bad thing to do. This is a very professional environment. So I want to temper those types of comments. Number two, we were trying to accommodate this request from Department of Transportation. So for that matter, this is the public input session. So I'm really glad that you came, and I'm really glad that I know that the Parks and Open Space Committee was invited to attend this, to have it be a combined meeting. That didn't occur, but we did put out that invitation. So we were trying to accommodate a request that was made to us. So thank you for everyone for adapting to that. What I'd like to do at this time is that was actually, we took all of our comment. So I'm going to make a motion to adjourn. We are going to take a 5-minute break, a bio break, and then convene our village board meeting, where we will take up the 4 decision points that we have in our agenda. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, trustee Ursink, motion seconded by trustee Kudo. We are now adjourned. Oh, all those in favor?
Aye.
We are now adjourned at 7:36. We will be back at 7:40. overview. There are 4 items they would like our action on this evening, our consideration of this evening. And so at this time, we've already presented all the information. And we've had time for public comment and discussion. So at this time, I would like to move through each decision item. Item number 1, consideration of curb extensions, also known as bump outs. The Wisconsin Department of Transportation has indicated that they will support the inclusion of bump outs at 5 key uncontrolled intersection within the project corridor as shown in the attached illustration, including Edgewood Avenue, Menlo Boulevard, Jarvis Street, Olive Street, and Kensington Boulevard. I would like to, at this time, ask if there's a motion to approve the intersections considered for curb extensions at this time.
So moved.
So
You want me to read the full motion?
I would.
Got there. Hold on. So I move approval of decision item number 1, consideration of curb extensions. I move to approve all 5 suggested extensions.
And just to clarify, the intersections of East Edgewood Avenue, East Menlo Boulevard, East Jarvis Street, East Olive Street, and East Kensington.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, motion by trustee Ursink, seconded by trustee Lynn. Any discussion?
I'm just still really having a problem with doing this prior to knowing whether or not we're gonna have a no left turn from Lake Drive to Jarvis going northbound. I have no problem with any of the other ones.
Would you like to amend the motion? To include a recommendation of installing a no left turn sign at the intersection of Jarvis going north?
I would, in fact.
I'd be in
And
favor of that.
I would be happy to include
Friendly-
exactly your language.
Friendly amendment? Okay, both trustee Ursink and trustee Lynn accept that friendly amendment. Good teamwork, trustee Kudo. Trustee Stokebrand.
Could you please reread the motion then? It would be to approve all the bump outs as proposed with, or what's the question about if there's no left turn allowed for the northbound lanes at Jarvis, then we don't want the bump out there?
The motion was amended to include with the addition of a recommendation to install a no left turn sign on the northbound of Lake Drive at Jarvis.
Okay, thank you.
So a vote yes would be supporting those 5 intersection with that recommendation. A vote no would be to not support. There is no guarantee of whether that recommendation would be taken by Department of Transportation. Okay, any other discussion? All right, hearing none, let's take a roll call vote, if we might.
Trustee Lynn,
Aye.
trustee Ursink,
Aye.
trustee Stokebrand,
Aye.
trustee Kudo,
Aye.
trustee Moore Baldoff,
Aye.
president McKeag.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0.
Excellent, thank you very much. Moving on to decision item 2, direction regarding uncontrolled intersection crosswalks, location and marking type. At this time, we are asked to consider marking crosswalks in the ladder style at the following key intersections: Edgewood Avenue, Menlo Boulevard, Jarvis Street, Olive Street, and Kensington Boulevard. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that crosswalks be marked in the ladder high visibility style at the intersections of East Edgewood Avenue, East Menlo Boulevard, East Jarvis Street, East Olive Street, and East Kensington Boulevard, acknowledging that the Village of Shorewood will be responsible for the cost difference between these standard and high visibility markings.
Second.
Motion by trustee Lynn, seconded by trustee Kudo. Any discussion? Trustee Stokbrand?
So this would be both sides of those intersections, the north and the south.
At Jarvis.
At Jarvis is the only one that has north and south. I wish you were here because you could see the map that they printed out for us is really nice.
Okay.
But yeah, that would be the only one that has both. It is.
It
but
is in
small.
the
It's-
packet.
it's
Do you
nice
want
and
us?
big.
Okay, and then my question becomes also, and maybe this is unrelated, but so then wouldn't we also want to have that ladder crosswalk in all of those, in the north, crossing from the north to the south end of each of those east-west ones like Jarvis but that's, I guess that's for another discussion for the village later because the state won't pay for it, so.
Well, that also, I would just add, the crossing that direction north-south is technically a marked or a protected intersection with a stop sign because the cars coming that way are stopped. So it's a little different than the totally uncontrolled crossing the other way across the street, which is kind of, it's in line with
Right.
kind of what we normally do, Jen.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote.
Trustee Ursink,
Aye.
trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
trustee Kudo,
Yes.
trustee Moore Baldoff. Aye. Trustee Lynn,
Aye.
President McKay.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Moving on to decision item 3, rectangular reflecting flashing beacons. The 2020, we are being asked to consider whether we would like to install flashing beacons at 2 intersections. The Department of Transportation will approve up to 2. The cost is the responsibility of the village for those devices. The 2 intersections that are being recommended are at Menlo Boulevard, which is at the Nature Preserve, and Jarvis Street, which is near Atwater Park. Jarvis Street would include a total of 4 flashing beacons to cover both crosswalks. Is there a motion to approve?
So I move that rectangular rapid flashing beacons be installed at the intersection of East Menlo Boulevard and East Jarvis Street, acknowledging that their material installation and maintenance costs will be the responsibility of the Village of Shorewood.
Would you also like to recommend that they be wired at Jarvis
I
so that
was
they
just
all
gonna
blink
ask,
at the same
am I
time?
allowed to include that? And I would like to recommend that the Jarvis Street, if possible, is wired onto for all 4 to flash when any button is pressed.
Second.
Okay, motion by trustee Lynn, seconded by trustee Ursink. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'd like to take a roll call vote.
Trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
trustee Kudo,
Yes.
trustee Moore Baldoff. Aye. Trustee Lynn,
Aye.
trustee Ursink,
Yes.
President McKay.
Yes,
Motion carries 6-0.
thank you. Moving on to decision item 4, approval of and concurrence with advanced schedule. As you will recall, we originally were planning on this construction to take place in 2026. Was it? Anyway, we are being asked to consider a total of 3 options, really. One is good and the other 2 are not. We can keep it as a possibility of 2026 with the possibility of it moving forward to 2025. We can lock in to 2025 construction, Or we can take on the entire cost of the project on our own and schedule it whenever we like. So given that those are the three options, is there a motion to concur with locking in at 2025?
I'll move to concur with locking in 2025 for the reconstruction of Lake Drive Boulevard. What, do we need more?
We need a second.
I'll
second
Okay.
That's the end of my motion. I have no more motion.
All right, motion by trustee Kudo, seconded by trustee Moore Baldoff. Any discussion? Okay, I'm not seeing any members of the public that need to be heard. Seeing none, let's take a roll call vote.
Trustee Kudo,
Yes.
trustee Moore Baldoff,
Aye.
trustee Lynn,
Aye.
trustee Ursink,
Yes.
trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
president McKay.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0.
Director Bushlick,
I don't
loud.
really like
Yes.
Yeah.
yell. Okay. I apologize that the memo did not include some of the nuances that the state has requested related to crosswalks. So I'm wondering if you could perhaps revisit and make some specific direction related to the crosswalks that cross the east-west street, whether you'd like them marked and in what style. I believe the display or the illustrations in the presentation showed them marked in a traditional style, which is the single lines outlining the crosswalk. As we mentioned, previous direction from the board has been to utilize the ladder style. So we would just look for some.
So the motion, it was read to be marked in the latter high visibility style.
Right, but I just would like clarification that that was intended for not only the Lake Drive crosswalks, but the side street crosswalks, because that's not how it was depicted in the illustration.
Thank you. So is there a motion to recommend one or the other?
Or to proceed with the current.
I
project,
actually
which
don't
is
have,
latter.
I don't have a strong opinion on this one. Because in the village, throughout the village, at some of the stop sign indicated, at most of them, it's still traditional. So I'm totally okay with the traditional on that direction. But always I'm in favor of the high visibility going the other direction. But of course, I'm certainly not opposed to more high visibility crosswalks, so.
And I should say, since we are not, actually, it's not agended for consideration of this in particular, let's just give consensus.
I'd be in favor of traditional.
Trustee Stokbrand?
I would favor the latter just because it's such a high use area in the summer and anything to increase visibility. But I wonder, this kind of ties into, I believe, something else later in our agenda about how we're going to deal with traffic calming, right? Painting on the streets. So, I mean, I guess I don't see that I think we should address this to Leanne's point, but now is probably not the right way to do it.
Okay, so I'm hearing consensus direction with the traditional style. Okay. And trustee Stokbrand, if there's something that you want to follow up on for a future item, we can put that on the agenda. All right, that brings us to decision item 5, which is endorsement of the preferred typical section. This otherwise known as sort of the lane configuration of the portion through Shorewood of Lake Drive. This is the one item tonight that if we wanted to make a motion to defer, we could. I mean, we could defer any of them, but anyway. However, if there is a motion to defer, it needs to be very clear as to what the additional time, what additional information the board would be looking for and how we would get that information. So for example, it comes down to there are 4 alternatives of lane configuration. All of them include bike lanes with the removal of parking on the west side of the street. It really comes down to whether we have parking on the east side at the curb or whether we have a bike lane at the curb with a parking lane next to it, and then traffic. Or if we have parking at the curb, a bike lane, and a 3-foot buffered area. So either way, we have dedicated bike lanes. All alternatives present dedicated bike lanes. One alternative presents a protected bike lane with a buffered area, and the protection is in the form of a parking lane. The other 2 alternatives, I guess, have buffered bike lanes next to traffic. So we had a lot of discussion at the committee of the whole. We had a very passionate and well-articulated plea from appeal from Mr. Pendleton about the importance and the feasibility of a protected, dedicated bike lane. I also presented information related to concerns around visibility sightlines for with a protected bike lane. Those were countered by Mr. Pendleton with experience of cycling and other examples, which I appreciate. It leaves a maintenance question because a protected bike lane creates a 5-foot span width of pavement that needs to be cleared of snow and leaves in order to be in order to perhaps meet expectations of a passable lane. We do not currently have the equipment or the staff capacity to offer that level of service. So if we do request that alternative, please know that we are doing that, and that commits us to a different level of service, either not meeting expectations by not clearing it, or contracting the equipment and the service necessary to maintain it. So that's a higher level of service that would need to go, that would have a budgetary impact. That's not unprecedented with North Oakland design. We just approved a lot of curb extensions that will impact snow removal. So we essentially made a service level decision with that design alternative. So not unprecedented, but in my commitment to being much more transparent and to hold the board accountable for what we ask of our current capacity of staff and what fiscal and time impact that has, I am committed to making that very clear. It's not a judgment either way. It needs to go into our decision-making. So at this time, I would like to ask if there is a motion to approve one of these alternatives.
Can I ask one question
Yes.
before we proceed?
Mhm.
This was something that I was thinking about earlier and forgot to mention earlier. But is there anything that we need to take into consideration, given that we own the parking lane, but not the bike lanes or the rest of the street, that
Interesting.
I
Do
can't
we?
think of a reason why it would necessarily matter that the parking lane was kind of cutting off what they own versus what we own. But
Do we
would
own
that be a consideration? Because my understanding was we pay for the parking lane. That's all our,
Pay
okay,
for the parking lane,
to be constructed?
correct?
because the state owns the highway, the roadway and the bike lanes, and we operate the parking lane, correct?
We park in the parking lot, and the DOT can provide some clarification, but
Because I know there's a fiscal component there, but
Deborah Tarno, Wisconsin Department of Transportation, and to answer your question, it's fiscally related as well as associated with the agreement we have with the municipality for construction of the highway. It has more to do with cost than it does the configuration.
With anything else, okay.
And I would just like to add some clarification. What we're really seeking right now is some guidance or feedback as to whether you want the bike lane along the curb lane or the parking along the curb lane. How we paint it, we can work out those details as we advance the project.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sort of makes it easier, right? Trustee Stokbrand.
So is it worth asking, what about the buffer? If we approve the buffer, the 3-foot buffer, where does the payment responsibility lie for that?
The 3-foot buffer is considered part of the bike lane, so that would fall under the agreement of the municipality. The cost of the parking lane is the village's responsibility, regardless if it's next to the curb or between the curb or between the bike lane and the through lane. I just thought, I apologize, I should have mentioned this earlier, but there's something else I feel I need to share with you to make clear. The bike lane along the curb lane is not a typical conventional roadway configuration that the department currently supports. We are in the process of evaluating our different alternatives. So if you choose to pursue that or go down that road, we still would have to go through an evaluation process as to whether it would require a special consideration. But I don't want to throw that out there that we wouldn't accept that idea. It's just not automatic. It requires us to do a little bit more process to get that approved in a sense. Because it's not one of our typical configurations currently.
But so if we had parking next to the curb and then a buffered bike lane, that is a typical configuration.
Correct.
Okay.
So just to recap, the buffer would be paid for by the state.
Yes, ma'am.
So about how much money would it save us if we go with the buffer?
It will have no impact on your costs. The cost savings is associated with bump outs. There's a little bit of a cost savings by implementing the bump outs because there's a decrease in pavement. But whether you have a 6-foot wide bike lane and a 12-foot lane, it's still 18 feet. It's just a matter of how we paint those 18 feet.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Is that clear as mud? All right. Yes, sir. Would you like to be heard? That's okay.
Sir,
Just,
can you please come to the microphone and then state your name
Gotta
and
go
address,
right
please?
up.
and you have to talk so loud. It's embarrassing, but you can do it. I have to do it. I have to listen to my voice all the time. It's
Okay.
awful.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you. Al Letourneau, 2510 East Lake Bluff. Thanks all of you, first of all, for your service to the village, and thanks for your time this evening. I'll be brief. I, like Mr. Pendleton, am a very avid bicyclist. I ride down Lake Drive 5 or 6 times in both directions per week. So I have very long experience with that. And first of all, congratulate all of you or whomever it was that made the decisions on the vast improvements that I've seen in my 20+ years of living in Shorewood, because Lake Drive used to be terrible and now it's not that bad.
Mhm.
But I think we could collectively make a next step here that would make a lot of sense would be to have option 4, where the bike lane is isolated from the traffic. And I would just point out an occasion that took place 4 to 6 weeks ago on Lake Drive in Shorewood, where some friends of mine were in a group riding north, just south of Atwater Beach. And a motorist who just couldn't stand to wait her turn got frustrated and veered into the lane, which is shared between bicyclists and parking, knocked down 3 or 4 people. An ambulance had to come. They had her on a GoPro camera, so I guess she was prosecuted in some way or other. But this kind of negative interaction between cyclists and motorists is not a hypothetical. This is the real thing. I mean, when they say that these quotes save lives, I don't know, in that particular case, people were hurt, not killed certainly, but I would just prevail upon you to consider that anything we can do to keep motorists and cyclists separate from one another is good for both of them. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Pendleton.
Sandy Pendleton, 3529 North Frederick Avenue. I respectfully ask the board to defer the question of protected lanes versus non-protected lanes for 2 weeks to allow the Parks and Public Spaces Committee, and particularly the Bike and Pedestrian Safety Subcommittee, to consider this, to look at the issues of visibility and safety. Are there studies out there that support the suggestion protected bike lanes create safety issues? I don't think there are. I'm willing to look at them if there are. Also on the issue of maintenance, again, I think it's appropriate to have the committee, subcommittee consider that. Talk with staff, get staff's views on that. And if there is an increased budgetary impact on this, what is it? I mean, we've just approved tonight something like $20,000, $40,000 in improvements, blinking lights and
More than that.
more than,
Yeah.
considerably more than that. Okay, fine, it's appropriate. It improves safety. That's why we did it. Same thing as to protected bike lane. We shouldn't just make the decision, we shouldn't have these because there's going to be a cost. We should know what the cost is, and then we should weigh those costs. We should weigh the safety value too. That would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess I would like to just again, we did ask to convene the Open Spaces Committee to join us this evening. So we can defer. There's no guarantee that that committee would be able to convene and have that discussion. Now, but,
Our schedule next.
oh, perfect. Okay.
We're gonna go on election.
Yeah.
Next Tuesday, that's regular schedule.
Thank you for that. And I will also say I'm gonna kind of put a pin in it. It is very easy to, the committee is not responsible for the overall fiscal impact of service levels, the board is. So it's great to have input from committees and recommendations, but it's ultimately us that has to make that determination. Trustee Ursink.
I think in the long run, I would be open to option 4, but also as the chair of DPW and working with Leanne and the department, this is a very, very tough ask. And the one thing that I fear the most is that we're not able to get to these services. We're not able to get into clearing these paths quick enough. And then once we don't clear these paths, we have no path at all. And I think that's the scary, that's kind of like the hardest part of this decision is, we can work with DPW, we can work with land, we can eventually figure out a solution to clear these paths. But right now, in the short term and long term future of DPW, our staffing is down. We have a lot of big projects coming up. It's going to be very difficult to earmark X amount of dollars to just continuously clear a bike path down Lake Drive. And once that bike path isn't cleared as fast as the bikers would like it, there's going to be no bike path at all on Lake Drive. And I think that's what I fear the most is we're going to get to a point where we have zero bike lanes because of snow or debris or things that are happening in the village. Now, I don't know how often Lake Drive is used to bike in the middle of winter when there's a lot of snow. I'd assume there's still a lot of bikers that are out there, but to put that on DPW, especially right now in the next couple of years, is a very, very, very difficult ask without knowing, I'm just saying from knowing where the budgets are and maybe you guys not knowing where the budgets are, what's happening with DPW, it's a very, very challenging ask to have them focus on that. So, but I mean, aesthetically, I think that would be great. I think aesthetically it looks great. And I think this would be a fantastic option. I'm just really, really nervous about service levels and then not having the option of a bike lane once that lane is snowed in.
And I'll also add that the comparisons made between much larger class 1 cities, they just have, even though Milwaukee has incredible, budget concerns, their resources in terms of public works are just different. You can't compare, you cannot compare Shorewood, our operations to a much larger city. So we just have to, again, apples to apples. We are in a unique situation. Not saying it can't work, but it is, we are acknowledging we would be changing service levels. Trustee Kudo.
So I'm sure I missed something, but all of these options are 44 feet wide,
Mhm.
right? And so when you're constructing, this is for DOT or engineer, when you're constructing the road, it's all the same road for that 44 feet? Or are the parking lanes lighter construction, or is it like, how does it work out?
The answer to your question is it's constructed in section, but yes, it's ultimately one road, but we do have joints.
Okay,
Like we'll have, in this case, we'll have an integral curb, which is normally 6 feet wide, which can accommodate the bike lane. But so it's kind of all one road, but jointing that concrete is the issue.
Okay.
When you go to the,
Configuration.
right.
Mhm.
and so then we run into the same problem we have on Oakland, where there's a joint in the middle of the bike path or the bike lane. But my question is, this is 44 feet in all 4 options. Why do we have to decide how we paint the road tonight?
Excellent question. And we don't need a decision on how we paint the road tonight. But it would just help us in planning and moving forward if we have an idea of whether you want the bike lane along the curb or if you want it along the through lane, because we have to figure out those joints as we move forward.
That's what I mean. Okay,
There you go.
that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Way to boil it down. All right, we're kind of getting past a half hour with this. Well, no, not with this item, just 10 minutes. So again, it's important, but I want to know, are we getting to a vote tonight or are we getting to a deferral? That's what I want to know. So did you have something?
Yeah, I was just wondering if, I hate to add more to the Leanne's plate, but what would the cost to that be? And I know you don't have the answer right
Like if
now.
we contracted it out?
What would the cost to cleaning the bike path be? I'd love to just know those numbers. So, I'd be willing to defer until we see kind of a cost on what maintenance for a bike path like this would be.
Okay, well, let's finish up this as far as, would you be able to get that? Or would we be looking at like a contracting, like a landscaping contract? Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So if anything, you'd be we'd be doing it internally. Okay.
And so it would be an equipment cost because we don't have anything that's the same width that would be appropriate to use next to parked cars, basically.
And
I would assume,
oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm just gonna say, I'd assume it'd be the same person and equipment that we will soon be employing to clean out the bump outs on Oakland as well. Probably, that would probably all be the same. No, okay, so it'd be an additional on top of that, which we're already
These are
planning on
special
adding.
bump-outs.
And would we need special liability if that machine were to scrape the cars or to hit the cars? I mean, these are the costs these are,
Yep.
it's a big cost and it's a big project and I'm just trying to wrap my head around it for this bike lane, so I just want, I want the residents to understand the impact. So.
Well, and it's tough because it's happening outside of a more comprehensive like streets. And it's one thing if you're doing a strategic plan where you're changing your policy. And so we're going to have these things. And so we know how to budget them and plan for them. But this is one stretch of highway that we don't own, and that's why, that's what's hanging me up. It's easy for me to think big picture and how to project. And so Director Bushlick, did you have something to say? I know that Trustee Stokebrand has her hand up. No, okay. Trustee Stokebrand?
Are you ready for a motion?
Sure. Unless were there other comments in the queue for trustees? Mr. Pensland, I'm gonna ask, you've actually spoken more than I was gonna let anyone speak, so. Okay, I appreciate it. Did you want to make a motion, Trustee Stokebrand?
Yes, I move that the village support the alternative for Lake Drive in 2025 that would allow for a buffered 5-foot bike lane with parking at the curb.
Is there a second? Okay, motion fails for lack of second. I'll second, actually. I forgot that I could set a second.
I'm okay. I'm okay seconding it
Okay.
as well. Or,
You want me to second it?
no, you already did it. I was just getting there mentally.
Okay. All right, motion by Attorney Denine, did I, did I kill it too soon?
No,
Okay. Motion by trustee Stokbrand, seconded by trustee Lynn. Discussion? I think.
So I will, from an aesthetic perspective, I love the other option. I love option 4, but knowing this village, knowing where our staffing level is at, knowing where the budget's at, I think I will definitely vote in favor of the parking at the curb. And it's, I love the other version. I think that'd be great, but I just don't think it's feasible for this community right now.
I would also just add that if like Milwaukee and Whitefish Bay, if they wanted the bike lane on the curb too, or something like that, and if that's what WISDOT wanted, I'd be happy to go that direction as well. So.
Trustee Baldoff.
I guess my question is just that we can defer this, right? I mean, it doesn't hold anything up.
For 2 weeks. Well, we
Yeah,
could
for 2
defer
weeks,
if we
right.
wanted to,
Okay, I just wanted to
but-
clarify that.
I'm gonna I'm gonna vote no on the motion because I would prefer to defer it to get some of the answers that trustee Ersting mentioned. To get feedback from committee. And I think, I think this is a big decision, and having 2 more weeks to sort of noodle on it. So I'll vote no, but would be happy to vote yes on a deferment.
I would support a motion to defer.
Is it, if we defer this, will the parks, open spaces, bike and pet safety, will they have a chance to look at this if we defer it? I mean, is this something that we can get on their agenda and have them convene about and give us their recommendation?
Mr. Pendleton seems, he
From,
needs
from
to.
when I was on that committee, our agenda, it didn't need like a week ahead of time
Yeah.
or anything like that. So I think it only needs like 24 hours or 48 hours max. And if they're not meeting till next Tuesday,
Mhm.
then I think they could definitely fit it on their agenda for next Tuesday.
Yes,
Oh,
yeah,
Chime in.
yeah,
Okay,
but we
I
also,
don't think that we need them to chime in. I think
Yeah.
that that's something that could be possible.
Okay.
yes,
okay.
And I'm,
It
and
won't-
on the second, and just to follow up on that, and is it possible for Leanne to chime in on that potential meeting, to just give them a little background on what the costs are associated? Because I know it's easy to go into this saying like, I love this, I would love this
Mhm.
option, and that's probably what will happen. But the
Mhm.
reality of the situation is there's a lot of things behind the scenes that make it really challenging. And I think
Mhm.
hearing it from Leanne would help in that decision as well.
Trustee Stokbrand
Well,
has her hand raised.
yes, I have a response to that, but trustee Stokbrand?
I was just wondering, would there be any attempt at outreach for the residents who live on the east side of Lake Drive to weigh in? Because these are the people that will be trying to get out of their driveways with an extra, the visibility issue that Leanne mentioned.
Actually, I mentioned it.
Oh.
Just so you know. Leanne's getting pegged with enough tonight. I think I'll take some heat.
All right.
Would there be any outreach planned? From the state or from the village?
Yeah, what would we be able to facilitate? Could we send a letter to the residents? I'm getting in.
Trustee Sokran, you actually suggested you were going to go door to door. Can we just rely on you for that, everybody down there? It's only 1 mile.
Your dog can run the flyers. Okay, I think we've covered that. So yes, that's a possibility. Trustee Stokebrand, did you have anything else that you wanted to add? Okay. Here's, oh, yes,
No.
Manager Ewald?
No, I was just gonna confirm where you were at.
Okay. I'm gonna make one comment and I'm just gonna be the big bad Grinch I've been at this a long time. I know that the committee is going, whether they hear from Leanne or not, we as a community, we don't listen to staff. We don't. We try to, but in things like this, I think it's going to be very hard for a citizens committee to come out and say no to a protected bike lane, because there's no rational reason. Why would I say no to a protected bike lane? It's the best option. But to Trustee Ursing's point, we're in a different place. It also doesn't mean that, so we have a bike lane that is covered with snow and frozen leaves for a period of time. Maybe that's not the end of the world. But this community struggles with expectations, and we can say in this room that we're all good with it, but there are 13,000 other people in town that may have a different direction and a different opinion. So we can defer for 2 weeks. I think we will be back in the exact same place, and the board is going to have to make the hard decision. And we're probably going to have to go against, we're either going to go with what the group here tonight wants in the emails that we've gotten and the committee wants, or we're going to go with this proposal, this motion that's on the table right now. Not to say that we should or shouldn't do it, but I'm just going to say, I don't think anything dramatically is going to change. I think a whole lot of more people will give their input. And at the end of the day, we will come down and some people will get what they want and some people won't. And that won't be easy. So I would support taking, I think the best thing is to defer to give those 2 weeks, but I also want to be very clear that we may not be in a very, very different place next time. I think it's still going to be a hard decision about adding a service level without a way of meeting that service level. I think we have a huge history of saying, we really want this, we will pay for it. And we are coming up against, the realities of doing that for 20, 30, 40 years.
So procedurally, we have a motion and a second on the table.
Right, so we need to follow through with that. So I will call the question and ask for a vote at this time. So the motion on the table, could you read it?
That move that Shorewood endorse the buffered 5-foot bike lane parking at the curb.
Okay.
Ready? Trustee Moore Baldoff.
No.
Trustee Lynn.
No.
Trustee Ursing.
Yes.
Trustee Stokebrand.
Aye.
President McKeag.
I will say no.
Motion fails 3-2.
Do I get to vote?
Oh, gosh. I'm
So-
so sorry. That was.
I know I'm way down here on the end, but
Yes, no, sorry, because I tried to rotate your positions.
motion still fails.
Trustee
No,
Kudo.
I vote no. But I'd like to make a motion to
Yeah.
defer this item to the next village board meeting.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I,
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion carries 4-1, no, 5-1. Procedural question, since the motion failed tonight, if it comes back in 2 weeks and the dedicated bike lane fails, and somebody makes a motion for this alternative that we voted down tonight, does it have to be reconsidered or can it just be made again?
Well, the motion didn't pass, so you can come up again.
Oh, okay.
Or some variation of it. I mean,
Mhm.
I believe that the motion is the first, so it takes precedence now because you decided to after it passed to defer it. So you're gonna take it up again. I don't think you have to have a reconsideration. I don't think that vote has any impact on it.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so that concludes that special order of business. Moving on, thank you, everyone. Moving on to 4B, presentation of Native American heritage in the village of Shorewood and discuss possibilities to foster land acknowledgement. Kathy Keene, president of Shorewood Historical Society. Thank you very much for your patience this evening and thank you for being with us on this important topic.
It is an important topic. Is this the proper voice level? Well, given the hour that it is now, some of you have been saved. Introductory Indian History 101 or the graduate course in History 495. And we can just acknowledge in shorter form a huge topic, which when I was asked to be on the committee, was eager to join, but knowing that to try to summarize where we are in southeastern Wisconsin with respect to our Native American heritage, it's a huge topic. And Shorewood's got a small part, but an important part, and maybe a part that not enough of us are fully aware of. And so I've been asked just to give a little bit of context for why Native American Awareness Month has been appropriated and why we might in Shorewood honor it with more proclamation. And I would think that many of us would like to know more about what's going on in our past, but a brief background of Shorewood's history really is tied to the much larger southeastern Wisconsin and Native American history because being bounded by the river and the lake is certainly a natural setting for which the geography and various tribal migrations, there's centuries of European trading interactions and empire contestations. The land and resources were valued by all kinds of people over generations and eons. But much of that history has not been recorded or lost because there was contact with white settlers, which is where a lot of our history has more normally started, but erroneously started. And that's part of what our historical voice should have recorded better than it did. I'm always reminded of the fact that we know more about Pere Marquette and the other French explorers, but we don't know about the Native American leaders of previous cultures whose oral history was passed down through relatives, but was not considered really important by the white reporters of the history, which is now what a lot of us look to. That brings me to now wanting to talk about all the Native American tribes that were here in the state and in the whole eastern part of Wisconsin. But I will simply mention that by the time the U.S. government was working on moving into this land after the American Revolution, the tribes had been already working with sometimes the French, sometimes the British. Here in Wisconsin, here in Milwaukee, tribal leaders had gone to make some special arrangements with the British and had some good relations with the U.S. soldiers or American soldiers as they were fighting. So they were able to kind of stay neutral here when seemed to be some other tribes were already forced to take sides. But by the 1820s, the U.S. government had started to make a treaty councils with various tribes to force removal if they were not going to willingly go. So by the early 1830s, the US worked with really Menominee to force them to cede their claims to the lands on the north and west part of the Milwaukee area, which is where Shorewood would have been. And then by August 1831, the first lands were being sold up in the Green Bay Land Office. The Potawatomi had lands in the southern part of southeastern Wisconsin, and their claims were ceded at a treaty in Chicago in 1833. But by 1834 and 35, the land was being sold off up in Green Bay at the land office. And removal of the Indians proceeded in various stages. But there was a resistance and a persistence, which various tribes left for a while, and then some wandered back. And today we have 11 federally registered tribes in the state, and they are a constant presence. And thankfully, their oral history is being more noticed. And we, in this whole area, have a number of local tribal residents who are helping us now to understand this better. As far as Shorewood in particular goes, we, even in our archives at the Shorewood Historical Society, have very few original documents or pieces of information that give us much history. But one source that, if you haven't seen it before, I recommend that you take a look at, and it comes from 1939, and it's the Federal Writers Project. During the 30s, the New Deal had a whole governmental program with a cultural aspect, and they paid workers to dig into our cultural history. And a number of writers were here in Milwaukee and did a special book on Shorewood. So it's kind of like a local history with some really good special stories. And to the credit of the Shorewood Village Board at the time, they helped support the project. So they were co-presenters when the book was finished. And we have copies in the Shorewood Library. But they do have a place where they were able to interview people who had stories about Native American past. And one of them talks about the white people that were here in the area interfacing with the early Native Americans. But they described that there were stories of people when they were building their houses here in Shorewood were uncovering flint and arrowheads and other things in the foundation. So we have some archaeological digging, informal, that was here in the farmlands as they were turning over. And then in 1919, the Milwaukee Museum staff member, Alan Skinner, was involved in an archaeology dig and found 2 burial mounds in what we now call Hubbard Park. And there's more descriptions in here of what was found in each of the mounds, a burial skeleton of a larger person and a smaller person. The public museum was involved with that project. But the mounds were still visible until 1937, when they were covered over at the time that the WPA was working more in the park to build the structures. Now, we may shake our heads today and think, well, how could we have done that? These were more recent Algonquin tribal artifacts, they think, because there are prehistoric materials all over southeastern Wisconsin, many of which have been dug up. Some are just obliterated and we don't know they're there. But there again, that's why we need these times to remember that there's a lot of history we haven't been looking at. Another interesting story of just a couple more. In 1841, the first permanent farmer, Thomas Bear, and his wife purchased land where Capitol Drive and the river meet. That was the Bear Farm, and we have some wonderful maps. That history we do have some good archives about. But Bear's wife, Jane, told her grandchildren, and it was later printed in a Shorewood paper that came down through stories in the late 19th century, that Farmer Bear's wife was out in the river. She used to fish along with local natives, and she was spearfishing with them in proper season. And her granddaughter loved telling that story. We don't have many of those kinds of stories locally that we can say in Shorewood, but they certainly were part of the larger story. And today in Hubbard Park, if you haven't noticed, you should, that the Shorewood Historical Society has this huge sign that marks the history of the park, of which the beginning talks about the mounds and that they were once there. The Sauk Trail also started down at where the three rivers meet, and I don't want to give you the whole Indian history that we could talk about, but the Sauk Trail left there and followed the river going north, and it came through Shorewood. We think it went from Kensington and Frederick and turned north. It was on its way to Green Bay. Now that's kind of history that should be as much as when the highway went through, but we're there again. Where's our awareness, and what can specializing some time to acknowledge can make us start thinking more thoughtfully about these things. I would, fortunately, that we do have very many local Native American people and organizations willing to help assist us in this. And the UWM Studies Department in Native American History has been already helpful to us and to other people in the community. The Public Museum has done a lot of work that we just need to keep approaching. And then Marquette has started some new student work. In fact, they're just now investigating something called the Estabrook Stone, which apparently is an artifact that I inquired of the professor just within the last 3 weeks. And he said, well, his students, a graduate student's been working on it, but you have to get back to me exactly where this stone and its meaning is. But we need to be aware of the information that should be known that we don't, and also the misinformation that we have been living with that we really ought to do a better job of correcting. So as we go through making land acknowledgements, which have become something to show respect and understanding, there's a new movement also going simultaneously that some institutions and some Native American voices in particular are kind of also cautioning us on being too quick to make an acknowledgement and then let that be it. And that we've, within the last year, there are a few places that have already said an acknowledgement without any kind of more thoughtful action or deeper understanding of what you might do next is kind of like a token performance without any meaning. And I know that the committee that we had earlier in the summer was talking about that here in Shorewood. And so that's where there are places now where they're making the thoughtful choices on what to do about if they do a land acknowledgement, what will they say later? The Shorewood School District has just put out on their website for this month, a very nice page on what they would like to encourage the community to think about during American Heritage Month. And they give a brief history of how the day and then the month became more a part of our culture. UWM has also a statement like that at the top of their Indian Studies Department. But even when they put it out, they said, this is information for the university and its departments to use thoughtfully as they deem it would be a stepping stone to something more significant. But in the Shorewood District's webpage, I really recommend you look at it because it has quite a few nice links to things that you can individually do to more inform you yourself or your families about ways to explore Native American history and culture. So this is Shorewood Historical Society is happy to help support our work here in the village. We really have a rich place in which to study southeastern Wisconsin, to study Native American connections. And the fact that the village is interested in it, I think how could we argue with that? That's our initial start here.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, any questions for expert Keen, the President Keen?
What were the tribes that were most prevalent in this area?
Okay, so we have the Sauk and the Fox, and then the Menominee, and the tribe, the Chippewa, really are the Ojibwe, and then and the Ho-Chunk the Ho-Chunk were the Chippewa, and the Ojibwe were the Winnebago. And I European cultures often gave those names, and then we have to remember them. Oh, we also have in the northern part of the state, there's like the several tribes that are identified by their location. They're part of the larger tribes. And did I say the Potawatomi too, of course? And that's, we really are rich in that respect, and they are living in their areas where we can still communicate. For years, the Indian Summer Festival was a great way for people to learn locally, and it was authentic. That's the piece. Letting Native Americans speak for themselves and share their culture without having it be interpreted is what I think more people want now. And we can do it if we care to.
Mhm.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Well, Shorewood Historical Society is happy to help, and our archives are not as rich in this research, but we have a lot of other things you should check out.
If we wanted to schedule some time to come visit with you and talk a little bit more, are you there frequently, or how do we get a whole, like? what's the
There
best
is a
way to-
website for the Shorewood Historical Society, and since we're an all-volunteer organization, we can't get you as maybe the day you write, but if you write to our website address, we will get back to you. We do have a room in the lower level of the library where we have in-house history research going on. We're really encouraging people now to become more aware of their own house history. If they have stories or materials about their house, we want them to share that with us. I just had that presentation in the library a week ago, 100 years of Shorewood architecture. We really have an amazing opportunity here to help our residents know more about the village, and then to work on making wise decisions as we go forward with what we've got to work with.
Fantastic. And you guys take donations on the website?
Oh, yes.
Are
But
the,
I was going to say too, that we really are interested in having more people be members. It's not just for people who lived in the village 50 or 60 or 80 years ago. We have a lot of very young, new families who really can learn a lot about their village from our research.
So, I mean, I would say I went in and did the research into my home. It was incredibly fascinating just to sort of learn about all the folks that lived there prior to myself and my family. I'm a proud member of the Historical Society, and I have the little plaque.
Oh, yes, our markers in front of our house.
My house is going to be 100 years old next year. So,
You know,
way
I
to
get
go.
so many comments about that. People want that, they want that back so badly, you know? That's one
We
thing
are
I hear.
actually, we had to wait for a time when we could get another number. It's not inexpensive to do it, but it is possible. And we've had over 500 houses now that are marked. And this is a community-wide asset that we're really happy. And I'm very enthused about continuing. We will look for the next round.
Good work. Thank you so much.
okay, trustee Stokbrand?
I just wanted to thank Kathy for the information, and I would wonder if, unless we can get a Native American person to convey information about them, if we could take the text that she had and just put that on the website somehow for the month with a link.
Sure.
Thank you.
Happy to do that.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this matter or be heard at this time? I don't see any hands. Okay, thank you very much. All right, that concludes our special order of business. So moving on to item 5, the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by trustee Moore Baldoff, seconded by trustee Kudo. Any discussion? Trustee Stokbrand?
Yeah, I'd like to pull items D as in David and F as in Frank, please.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exceptions of 5D and F? Yes,
So moved.
okay.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries, consent agenda is approved with the exception of 5D and F. Item 6, removed from the consent agenda. 5D, trustee Stockbrand.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so earlier this year, we had the request for the rectangular rapid flashing beacon on Wilson. And we approved that and it was installed. And is that something that would preclude approving this? Would this preclude us from doing something like that? I mean, I thought it was kind of responsive government.
My understanding was that Director Grupenchag, could you?
So items like that could still be requested, but they wouldn't be available for installation without being funded through the long-range financial plan. So people can still request it, but part of the issue with projects like that is that we don't have necessarily funds on hand to install signals or things of more costly nature. And so people can always still request those items. It just would possibly take longer to fund the installation of such an item.
So it would sort of be held to a budgetary decision.
Correct.
Okay.
So it would, in a way, it takes away our responsiveness. I guess that's my question. And I see that as a negative. So like the long range financial plan is done in like April, if I'm not mistaken, May. And so if someone comes with something in June, we'd say, well, bring it to us next year.
Well, not necessarily. We could process the request and make it known, and then we could defer it. Or I don't know that that would necessarily be the response to the resident, but Director Grupenchag?
I would just say part of the intent of moving it to an annual budget cycle was to acknowledge that the village does not have funds available to fund these projects on a monthly basis, right? And so if there are more costly things that needed to be considered, they needed to be considered in conjunction with other needs that the village has already identified. And so that was the intent of staff, just to make it more clear that we will take in the request, but there's also competing requests potentially. To your point, Trustee Stokebrand, it is possible that, yes, it would defer it for several months, but as we've heard tonight, there's various needs of the village in terms of financing other projects, and that was just staff's attempt to make it more clear as to whether or not we felt as though we had funds available for these types of requests, which there is no dedicated funding source for these types of projects.
So it's really kind of a level setting and a clear communication. It's a way of clearly communicating so that people can set their expectations. It's not really saying that it's not going to be done necessarily.
Correct. That was the intent. We would still take it in and consider it amongst other funding needs, but correct, we would not be funding them on a month-to-month basis without having some sort of fund dedicated to it.
And I understand that, but then in item E as in Edward, we're using capital reserves to, we're being asked to use capital reserves to pay for a police squad. So, I mean, I don't know. And I'm a little bit confused by it also, it seems to deal mostly with crosswalks painted on the street, but then as I just learned, it also would apply to the rapid flashing beacons too.
Yep, that's kind of what's before us. Any other discussion? Okay, is there a motion?
I move to approve the refinement of policy 43, traffic and parking regulation request program as drafted.
I'll second that.
Motion by Trustee Lynn, seconded by Trustee Moore Baldoff. Any further discussion?
We had previously talked about this in committee, and so from my understanding of that, is really more of a clarification for the public. Of course, we can still do things because we have that power. So I thought it was, our interpretation from the prior meeting that this was on was that this was more of a clarification for the public to say, you can't just request like anything and expect it to get done next week, because it just physically might not, but that's not to say that it couldn't. So that was my understanding.
Appreciate that report. All right. Hearing no further discussion, like to take a roll call vote on this, please.
In honor of Trustee Kudo, I'd like to start with him this time and go out of order from the rotation.
Yes.
Trustee Moore Baldoff,
Yes.
Trustee Lynn,
Aye.
trustee Ursink.
Yes.
Trustee Stokbrand,
Nay.
President McKay.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-1.
Thank you. Moving on to 5F, or, 5F, consider RFP for document scanning. Trustee Stokbrand?
Thank you. When I was reading the minutes, there was something about, I wasn't able to make the October 17th meeting, and there was something in there about trustee Lynn made some comments, and then the comments weren't in there. And so I thought that was, needed some meaning. And I thought, if I could just go to, if it said in the minutes where to go to in the recording, then it would make it really easy for me to find out what trustee Lynn said. And so when I was looking at this RFP for the document scanning, I'm wondering, is there any way, what would really make this meaningful if we're not going to have more detailed minutes instead of something that says trustee Lynn made 2 points and then not say what they are? Why don't we guide people to the place in the recording where, just like have some sort of a marriage between the two documents, so that if someone wants to know what trustee Lynn said, it would be moderately easy to do so, because it would be linked to someone with more technology background than me could describe this more closely. But if it was like at 4.0, minute 4 minutes, 30 seconds or something like that. Is there anything we're doing in this document scanning for the minutes that would also allow us to have a system so that someone, without listening to, we're going to be going into a 3-hour meeting or more here, to find where in the minutes they could find something quickly?
So that will not be solved with document scanning, because we are looking back in time. At one point, we did do an RFP for software for village board preparation and minutes, and then the recording of them. And some of those features do have that capability. It was the decision to not proceed with that item because it was thought to have for the expenditure that it was be more than we had needed at the time in order to proceed. So no, that will not be accomplished through document scanning. However, we have in the past noted the time that we switched to different various items on the agenda and have put that in parentheses following that item. So if someone's looking at the recording, I've actually been tracking it tonight. You started discussion on consent agenda items at 8:49 p.m. You could take that and match it up to the minutes that are on the tape to more easily find.
So is that something that sounds wonderful, and I would appreciate that, and I think the residents would too. Is that something we need to codify with the village action in the future? Should I recommend that?
I don't think that would be necessary. It's something easy enough to do.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Other discussion?
I'll just say, I don't remember what I said about that, what my comments were. I don't have strong opinions about this, so it probably.
So we'll never know.
It was probably an unrelated comment, but that's all.
And trustee Stokbrand, that's something that I've been advocating for a while now too. I think to be able to go back in the minutes and to find the time code based on the conversation so we can easily access. I think that's a good kind of meeting point to where we were before with our minutes, where we were very, very descriptive and detailed, to where I think would be a happy middle ground where we could just annotate the time code for that discussion or that topic, and people can easily go into the YouTube video and hit that point. Or even on the YouTube video, there could be little chapter markers for each new agenda item. You could just go to that agenda item on the YouTube video and watch it there, because having a 4-hour YouTube video is pretty much useless. It's just very difficult to like figure.
Trustee Ursing?
Oh, I'm
I'd
sorry.
like to bring it back to the RFP at hand.
Sure.
If you don't, I'd love,
Okay.
believe me, I love
Sorry.
hearing about this.
Sorry.
Okay. So if we need to take that up, practically speaking, in another form, we can. Any discussion related to the RFP, or is there a motion to approve as presented?
I move to approve the RFP for document scanning.
Second.
Motion by trustee Stokbrand, seconded by trustee Kudo. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's take a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Moore Baldoff,
Yes.
trustee Lynn,
Aye.
trustee Ursink,
Yes.
trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
trustee Kudo,
Yes.
president McKeag.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. That concludes item 6. Item 7, public hearings. We have none this evening. Item 8, citizens to be heard. This matter is for items not on the agenda. Are there any citizens who would like to be heard this evening? I am not seeing any hands. Okay, moving on to item 9, new business. 9A, consider consultant for Public Works Facility Needs Assessment, Site Evaluation and Concept Design. We have a memo in our packet putting forth a recommendation. Is there a motion to, trustee Ursink, you participated in the review. Is there anything you'd like us to add you could add in addition to what's already here?
You know, all I have to say is that, we interviewed 2 really fantastic candidates. And I think, after those interviews, we all felt very confident about, moving forward with Barrientos. They've had quite a bit of, they've had just an amazing amount of experience with DPWs and working with DPWs. And the presentation was fantastic. And I felt like very confident moving forward with them. They hit on all of the notes that we're looking for here in this village. So I think they'll do a very, very diligent job of kind of scanning the whole scenario, whether it be building at our current facility or finding us a new facility. I think they've gone above and beyond to say, we will knock on doors. We will, even if a property is not for sale, we will ask if it is, if this would
They
be
would
appropriate
consider.
place to move to. So I think after those interviews, we all felt very confident that Barrientos was the right direction.
Great. Would you like to make a motion to approve?
I would love that. That'd be fantastic. I just got to get to it in the, yeah, here we go. All right, so I move to approve Barrientos Design and Consulting for the Public Works Facility Needs Assessment, Site Evaluation, and Concept Design in the amount of $25,384 and the services agreement attached.
Second.
Great. Motion by trustee Ursink, seconded by trustee Stokbrand. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's take a roll call vote.
Trustee Lynn,
Aye.
trustee Ursink,
Aye.
trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
trustee Kudo.
Aye.
Trustee Moore Baldoff,
Yes.
president McKeag.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Item 9B, consider architect for clerk customer service needs assessment, design and building. There's a memo in our packet that recommends a contractor for this. Is there anything you'd like to add, Manager Ewald?
No.
Pretty straightforward.
Yep.
All right. Is there a motion to approve?
Yeah, I can make a motion here. Just
Okay.
let me get there real quick.
Yeah, I'm trying to get, what page is it on?
That is
Barrientos has
182.
a
a
long,
lot of Barrientos in there. That's why we
Lot of
went with them.
Barrientos.
They're very, very
they
detailed
buried
here.
you.
Oh my God. Yeah, so just keep going here.
Page 182.
What is it?
182.
Whoa.
182.
That would have taken
Yeah,
me forever.
that's why we hired Barrientos. Okay. All right, so I move to approve Fisher and Theus for clerk customer service needs assessment, design and bidding in the amount of $14,000 with contingency in the amount not to exceed $5,000 should additional mechanical and structural engineering be required.
I'll second.
All right, motion by trustee Ursink, seconded by trustee Moore Baldoff. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's take a roll call vote.
Trustee Ursink,
Aye.
trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
trustee Kudo,
Yes.
trustee Moore Baldoff,
Yes.
trustee Lynn,
Aye.
president McKeag.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Item 9C, consider professional services agreement for 2023 SEA CI, CSI. The phase, gosh, my glasses. Phase 1 construction, inspection, and project management services. So we have a memo in our packet recommending Strand Consulting Services for this contract. Is there anything you'd like to add, Chair of Public Works?
Yeah, this
that's
was,
not in here?
this was a busy week for us. We interviewed quite a few firms for a lot of different projects that are moving forward in Shorewood, which is just extremely exciting. And it's hard to say that we're really excited about this sewer project, but we are really excited to finally kind of get this moving forward. So again, we sat through a couple of interviews, and I think we found ourselves really gravitating towards Strand based on past work and their presentation. They had a lot of energy. They said a lot of the kind of the right things that we were looking for. And I think the thing that stuck out the most to me was their kind of customer service and how they were going to deal with the public and how are they going to deal with the neighborhood, because that's going to be going on year 2 that these residents are going to be affected by this construction. So I think we put a priority in that meeting that the residents were a very sort of high priority, and they heard that loud and clear. So in the long run, that's why we decided to go with Strand.
Thank you. Would you like to make a motion?
I would love to make a motion. So I move approval of the Southeast Area Combined Sewer Improvements, Construction, Inspection, and Project Management Professional Service Agreement with Strand Associates in the amount of $492,200.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion by trustee Ursink, seconded by trustee Moore Baldoff. Any discussion? Hearing none, could we take a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
trustee Kudo,
Aye.
trustee Moore Baldoff,
Yes.
trustee Lynn,
Aye.
trustee Ursink,
Yes.
President McKeag.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
All right, item 9D, consider resolution 2022-16 to adopt a public participation plan to update the Village of Shorewood's comprehensive plan 2040 in conjunction with the commercial zoning update. So I will have Director Griepentrag guide us through this, but I want to say this really is a housekeeping measure. So this is not a significant update to the comprehensive plan. So we talked about it at the Plan Commission and made that motion, and it passed. Trustee Kudo was not present at that. So I'll hand it over to Director Griepentrag.
Sure. Thank you, President McKeag. So as you're hopefully all aware, throughout 2022, we've been doing a commercial zoning update with a lot of public participation public participation, 3 public workshops, and we are hosting a draft of the plan November 16th. That draft does have items that do not currently match the exact language in the comprehensive plan. So for that draft to be considered, we also need to consider updating our comprehensive plan. The one specific sentence that appears 3 times in the comprehensive plan is that ground floor. Essentially, it's saying commercial mixed use is required on the ground floor. Our consultant is suggesting that that's not feasible, that we don't have enough market to have ground floor retail in all parts of our commercial corridors. It also goes counter to our desire to have additional housing opportunities along our corridors as well. So in order for the current draft to be considered, a public participation plan would need to be adopted to consider updating the comprehensive plan concurrently with the commercial zoning update. So what is before you tonight is a request that a public participation plan be adopted that would go concurrently with both the commercial zoning update and the comprehensive plan, that if and when those items come to you as the board, they're able to be adopted concurrently.
So basically the open house on November 16th would serve as a public participation point and other scheduled meetings.
Correct. So any participation moving forward would specifically identify and ask that question to make sure the public is aware that we would need to identify or update the comprehensive plan alongside of it. So there will be a board or a station or whatever identifying whether or not there's any issues with amending the comprehensive plan to take that sentence out in 3 locations.
All right, with that, is there a motion? Are there any questions, or is there a motion to approve? Trustee Stokbrand.
Would there be something about that on the village website too, in case someone doesn't make it to that meeting?
Correct, that it will be added to the project website as well, so there'll be a separate section on there. Once again, concurrently running both of these updates together, the comprehensive plan and the commercial zoning updates, that would be in the same project website.
With some sort of call out or something so that it's, you know, highlighted that
Correct. Yes, if
typography or something.
Yes, if
Okay.
adopted, I would make that change probably tomorrow, just to make sure that it's clear in both locations, the comprehensive plan website and the project website, that this is the intention of the village to move forward with.
Thank you.
And I assume if any of us checked it out and we didn't feel like it was clear enough, we could give you feedback.
Correct.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments or a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
I move to approve resolution 2022-16, a resolution adopting a public participation plan to update the Village of Shorewood's comprehensive plan in conjunction with the commercial zoning update.
Second.
okay, motion by trustee Moore Baldoff, seconded by trustee Ursink. Any discussion? This will be a roll call vote.
Trustee Kudo,
Yes.
trustee Moore Baldoff,
Yes.
trustee Lynn,
Aye.
trustee Ursink,
Aye.
trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
president McKay.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0.
Great, thank you very much. That concludes our new business for this evening. Moving on to item 10, reports of village officials. First is village president. We have a proclamation in recognition of National Native American Heritage Month. And I apologize for not having any community partners or members of First Nations here as partners to read. I will read as such. Whereas in 1990, Congress requested that President Bush designate November as National Native American Heritage Month in recognition of the rich history and culture of the country's Native population. And whereas in 1995, Presidents Clinton, George W. Bush, Obama, and Trump have issued annual proclamations which designate November as National American Heritage, Indian Heritage Month, known since 2009 as National Native American Heritage Month, or more commonly as American Indian and Alaska Heritage Month. And whereas Wisconsin is home to 11 federally recognized tribes, including Bad River, Band of Lake, Superior Chippewa, Ho-Chunk Nation, Lac-Courte, Lac-Courte, I was like, I knew I'd get stuck on that. Lac-Courte, Band of Lake, Superior Chippewa, Lac du Flambeau, Band of Lake, Superior Chippewa, Menominee Tribe of Wisconsin, Oneida Nation, Forest County Potawatomi, Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior Chippewa, St. Croix Chippewa, Sokagon, that probably, is that the way?
That I don't know.
Okay,
the pronunciation.
Sokagon, Chippewa, Mole Lake, and Stockbridge, Muncie, in addition to other non-federally recognized tribes. And whereas the Village of Shorewood recognizes that the village currently exists on the ancestral homeland, and whereas as First Americans, Native Americans helped shape our nation at every point since its founding, including being the inspiration for the ideals of self-governance and determination that are the framework of government. And therefore, be it resolved that I, Ann McCaig, Village President of Shorewood, hereby proclaims the month of November is recognized as National Native American Heritage Month in the Village of Shorewood on this day, the 7th of November, 2022. Thank you. Moving on, 10A2, update on North Shore Fire Department meeting from November 1st. As you recall, President Kennedy from Glendale invited the chief-elects of North Shore to meet and discuss the consolidation study findings. We did that on November 1st. I also did mention that he wanted us to discuss placing a referendum on our April ballots, asking our communities if the community is interested in pursuing police consolidation with the North Shore. I agreed to bring it back to the board. So if this board would desire to hear more about that or to discuss the possibility of putting a referendum forward, or anything regarding the police consolidation study, because we have not had it on agenda, we could put it as a future item of consideration, take a motion. If it's approved, place it on the next agenda, and Brian Kennedy can come and present the findings and his support of police consolidation and why we should engage it as a strategic planning initiative across the North Shore. And if not, then we won't. So that's basically what I have as an update there. Any questions off the top of your head? Is that all clear? Yes.
I can comment quickly. I read the consolidation study. I have absolutely no interest in exploring consolidating police services with other North Shore communities.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. It's not something that I even want to take time to explore.
Same.
Okay. Well, then if it doesn't get on the agenda, it won't be explored. So the issue is, so you don't want to consider putting a referendum on the ballot that the public can weigh in on? Okay. That's a pretty powerful gateway of information there. So, okay. Probably for purposes of documentation, I will make a motion as a future item of consideration. It does not have to pass, but my position as the chief elected is my job is to bring information forward. So I'm doing it. If it doesn't get past us to the public, then that's there's nothing we can do about that. All right, item 3, report on meeting with North Shore Partners. Oh, I did that. Oh, I see, I skipped. Update on North Shore Fire Department meeting. The information's in the packet, right? So there's nothing to report there. Oh, there will be, yes, there is. So there's a difference in, we have to borrow for the advancement of the fire station in Glendale. That is everything's coming back higher. So there's an increased borrowing that exceeds the discretionary powers of the chief. So it needs to come back to all the municipalities to approve. We would like to expedite that timeline because the quicker that we agree, the quicker we can lock in on interest rates, which could save us up to $1.5 million in borrowing costs or total project costs. And so we are trying to move ahead on that. That meeting did not end up, there are resolutions involved, and that didn't occur last week. So it will come to us on the 21st, I believe.
Or December 5th.
Or December 5th.
Not sure.
Not sure. Is there anything to add to that? Okay. Report on the presentation hosted by the BID on homelessness in Milwaukee County, featuring the staff of Milwaukee County Housing Division or Homeless Outreach and the Shore Police Department. It was very well attended. I thought they did a great job and it was well received. The materials are posted for you and the recording is available. And that is all I have at this time. Reports of village trustees.
One thing, the Shorewood Rec basketball season has started. It's off to a great start.
That's
for the little kids.
For the little kids, that's adorable. I might have to be one of those weird people that comes and just watches because I don't have little kids anymore.
It's very entertaining if you're into chaos.
Yeah. Chasing the ball. All right. Reports of village manager, update on 3 Leaf.
So we have been informed by 3 Leaf that they're going to be submitting applications at the same time to both the Milwaukee grant opportunity that has been put out for RFP, as well as to the village of Shorewood. We have yet to receive that application, but that's what we've been informed of since the release of that Milwaukee County grant opportunity.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item 11, future items of consideration. I have one. Does anybody else have one? Okay. I will make a motion to put an agenda, make a motion to agenda a discussion of possibly, let's see, I didn't even think about to discuss the possibility of creating a referendum regarding police consolidation, North Shore Police Consolidation for the April 2023 ballot. The reason being that whether I like the idea of police consolidation or not, the reality is there are known efficiencies and savings and service level protections that are inherent in good consolidation, which we are already experiencing from a fire service, health department service, and 911 dispatch. We would not be able to be providing the level of service that we currently offer to our residents without that consolidated model. Because of that, and because of the constant demand and concern around the cost of services and our ability to maintain them, I feel a fiduciary responsibility to give the public that every ounce of every bit of information that I have at my fingertips, that I have at my disposal, and engage the public as to whether that is desirable or not. So that's why I'm going to make that motion. That is the entire motion. So from a service standpoint, I feel a fiduciary responsibility to put it at least on the agenda for discussion so that we know what we are saying we're not going to participate in. For that matter, I mean, I don't think there are other communities that are, but that's okay. I'm still going to do what I think is right. So I'm going to make a motion to agenda a discussion of the possibility of putting a referendum on our April ballot regarding North Shore Police consolidation.
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a motion by President McKay, seconded by Trustee Lynn. Any discussion? Trustee Stokebrand.
I guess I feel if this is approved, then instead of us having a discussion among ourselves, I guess I would like to have, I think at one point we could have had the Wisconsin public policy person make a 10-minute presentation. That would be helpful if this moves forward.
Yes, Rob Henkin would be, as long as he's available. We would
something brief.
We would schedule it for when both Mr. Henkin and Mayor Kennedy were available. Trustee Ursink?
Any feedback from the chief of police, Chief Worth, about the concept of this?
No, I mean, I have not spoken to our police chief. So my experience, and we're going through something similar at the ICC regarding the Act 26 and the designated point of service, public safety access point. No chief would welcome this no chief is going to say like, yes, let's go for it. I don't know that Chief Worth has said absolutely not. I wouldn't expect that of her. Consolidation is not usually something that people jump at. So.
Well, it works somewhat of a job.
Yeah. So I guess that doesn't really pertain to putting it on the agenda, doesn't go against anybody who's against it. All it does is put it on the agenda so that it can be presented in the light of day. And we go through what the options are and we say in public, yes, we're not going to, or no, we're not going to. Not putting it on the agenda just keeps the gate closed, in my opinion. I mean, that's as clear as it is. It doesn't matter. Putting it on the agenda does not mean that we support it. It does not mean that the public doesn't have a say. We saw how emails came flooding in over a bike lane. You know this place is going to be packed. But, you know, if you don't want that to happen, just vote no, and it won't happen. So I made my statement about why I'm doing it, and it's from a service level fiduciary responsibility. So anyway, okay, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
So let's do a voice,
No, can I just do a roll call?
yeah, roll call.
Okay, thanks. That'll be easier because then I can hear you also.
Mhm.
Trustee Lynn,
Aye.
trustee Ursink,
Nay.
trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
trustee Kudo,
Nay.
trustee Moore Baldoff,
Nay.
President McKay.
Aye.
Thank you. Vote ties at 3-3 and it fails.
All right, thank you very much. Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Oh, wait, who was?
So moved.
Okay,
Okay.
Ursink, who was the second?
Second.
Lynn.
You guys just say second. Nobody
Thank you.
said so moved.
No.
All those, I know, I said motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, we are now adjourned at 9:26 PM. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, shout out to the camera guy, the crew that's been here for like 4 hours. Like, yeah, that's putting in the work, guys. You could have came, got the couple shots and left, but you stayed the whole,
Have a good
the
night.
whole
Kathy.
time.
Have a good night, Kathy.
So
Are you
just
just
ruined
like
that shot.
bored to tears, or are you fascinated and you want to know more?